Alicia. I'm just,
Yeah, I don't know, I haven't, want to give her another couple minutes?
yeah. I'm missing a board member, and because this requirements on attending meetings to be able to vote on meetings, I'm going to give Alicia a few minutes to get here.
Do you want to call
So if you have a little bit of patience.
She's here for the public hearing. So written session, she has till 7:30, right? Because we can't start that until 7:30, no matter what. We can't start it early because of the public communication, right?
Okay, just like we can discuss other things. All right. All right, change my mind. We're gonna, as long as she is here for the public hearing, we should be good. We prefer not to extend our night if we don't have to.
This is what the
So,
commission shall approve the marijuana establishment. Issue a license.
we are gonna have a discussion on the marijuana bylaw revision. It's not a public hearing, it's just our general discussion to get us to the public hearing.
That's a wording I
And let
can
me
look at that.
say on record, because I got called out, my town residents, they call us out and everything, and they catch everything, which is awesome, that at the selectmen's meeting, our town administrator did mention that she had reviewed a draft of the new marijuana zoning bylaw, and it sounded like we had discussion and we created a new zoning bylaw. Let me explain on the record that it was, I went to the office and I sat with Bill and I said, these are all of the suggestions, the comments, the emails that I've been getting from our town residents, and I took all them and I put them in a draft, a zoning bylaw, and I handed it to Bill. In the meantime, that draft was handed to Robin and for the attorneys to review. I was not aware that that was actually all going to happen without coming to my board first, but there is a time constraint. We have to have a public hearing and have it ready for the special town meeting on October 15th. So it happened, we have a draft with attorneys' comments on it, but we will be discussing this and we will have a public meeting, and there isn't any collusion or controversies or any sort of deals like that. It was kind of a little bit of a jumping the gun, a little bit of a mistake. So no, there hasn't been any sort of open meeting law violations discussing this. It was me and Bill who sat down and met. Just wanted to have that on the record. Thank you. So, how do you want to?
Well, I see the major changes that it's pretty much in agricultural zone, everything's in N on this draft.
So the big main change was to take everything marijuana out of everything agricultural. So it's pretty much N down the line. And I think that the majority of the emails that I did receive and the calls and the people stopping me at Old Home Day and my kids' games and everything else, that was the one thing that everybody didn't want, was to have, and main reason is because our agricultural zone is really mostly residential zoning. So that was one of the changes we made. Bill, do you think, would it be easier for you to present, just because you...
Sure, the bylaw that was passed by town meeting,
You guys all using microphones?
sure.
It's just hard to hear back here with the commissioner.
Oh, sorry.
All right, sorry.
Thanks.
The bylaw that was passed by town meeting limited the number of recreational and retail uses, retail and medical uses to 2. In the draft, we decided to try to limit the number of marijuana establishments to 3. And then we tried to increase the buffer zone around schools and daycare centers to 1,000 feet. But we were told by council that there's a maximum distance of 500 feet, so we cannot increase the buffer distance around schools. And then we received comments from council today about our desire to limit the number of marijuana establishments to 3 townwide. Just wondering if Katie could explain why that's not possible.
Sure. So under the marijuana law, there is the ability of municipalities to either prohibit one or more types of marijuana establishments, and then there's also the ability to limit establishments with certain conditions being placed on that by the law. With respect to a prohibition of one or more types, so for example, if you wanted to prohibit retailers just as a class of use, that's one type of commercial marijuana establishment. A cultivator is another type of establishment. So a prohibition in any one of those categories, or a prohibition, a global prohibition of all types of establishments, would require a ballot vote and a bylaw in order to effectuate that type of prohibition. With respect to limitations, there is a threshold for marijuana retailers that's linked to the number of alcoholic beverages off-premises liquor license you have, and if you go below that threshold, there is again a requirement for a ballot vote if you wanted to limit the number of retailers to fewer than 20% of those licenses. There's an additional limitation threshold, which is if you want to limit in any one category of uses, if you want to limit to fewer than the number of medical marijuana treatment centers registered to engage in the same type of activity, that is also a limitation that requires you to go to a ballot vote. The issue with the language right here is that by imposing a limitation globally on marijuana establishments to 3, it would function as an effective prohibition of one or more types. Because if someone came in and got 3 marijuana, if you had 3 marijuana retailers that came in and took those 3 licenses, then effectively you've precluded a cultivator or a product manufacturer or any one of those other classes from having the ability to get a license within your town. An effective prohibition would be something that would require a ballot vote. So I flag this here as problematic in having the effect of perhaps prohibiting certain classes of uses based on whichever establishments come in to get the licenses. Under the table of use regulations, you'll see that there's a number of different types of uses. Retail sales, independent testing laboratories, marijuana product manufacturers, marijuana cultivator, indoor and outdoor. Then we also have a class for social consumption, which is not really a licensed category under state law right now, but maybe in the future. And a third-party marijuana transporter. So we have more than 3 types of uses under that global umbrella term, marijuana establishment. So it will be problematic to limit the licenses to only 3 because it would result in some of these categories being effectively prohibited from coming to get a license.
So it's about fairness.
It's not really fairness. It's more about the fact that in order to have a prohibition, there's a requirement that you have a ballot vote. Now, the language that's proposed here could be put to a ballot, and perhaps that would be a way of achieving the same effect, but it would have to be with the sanctioning of a ballot in addition to the bylaw amendment.
What about limiting to 1 of each type?
So that would be my proposal to the board, sort of counter to what you've proposed, would be to impose a limitation so that within each license use category, there can only be 1 license of each type. Now,
Except for retail, though.
except for retail. So retail is the exception to that. That one is the one that has the limitation threshold that is based on the liquor license category. And I believe based on the number of liquor licenses you have in the town, that would have to be 2. So you'd have 2 retailers and 1 in every other category.
The categories being third-party transporter, treatment center.
So medical marijuana treatment center operates outside of that So it's under a separate state regulatory scheme. So it's not subject to the same limitation language that's in the 94G. So I think you could potentially impose a limitation on medical marijuana treatment centers that was outside of that. The challenge here is that because we're dealing with two separate state regulatory schemes, there is language in 94G that specifically talks about the authority of municipalities to impose limitations, but there is nothing currently in Chapter 369 of the Acts of 2012 that authorizes the same limiting language for limiting the treatment centers.
But I guess, I would ask the board, with the elimination of marijuana establishments in agricultural districts, and the limitation we currently have of 2 retail and 2 medical, does the board have any problem with allowing these other uses in CB, IG, and BEP by special permit and not considering a limitation on number?
And one of each. We want to have.
Well, I was going to say, without doing a limitation of one of each, you're allowing unlimited usage of cultivating
Yeah,
or
so, but what's,
manufacturing.
but why not? I
As
mean,
long
if
as
it-
it's
if
in,
it's
so
an
what you're saying,
IG
as long as
district,
it's in an IG district,
right,
why not?
right. So I guess the question is, do you want to have that limit townwide or unlimited in those 3 districts?
And if, I mean, right now, outdoor cultivator is no across the board. Social consumption is already no across the board.
Yep.
So in reality,
We
testing laboratory, do we care if we get 2 testing laboratories?
I hear what you're saying, and I'm not sure,
In a BEP.
as long as it's in an industrial zone
Mhm.
and proper
Right.
zone. I'd probably go a little bit further than that and do overlay districts in certain industrial zones, because there are some industrial zones that we don't want 7 cultivators opening up altogether. So you may want to limit that to, industrial zones that are off the beaten path or whatnot.
The overlays, I didn't want to go to that complication, because it's a whole nother, puts us up a whole, but they're sounding better and better to me. And maybe it's something that we need to, just so we'll have control of, there are clearly places that they're better.
Yes, I would
you
agree.
know, that they should go and where they shouldn't go.
So we can look at that and we can limit it now, and we could always open it up later if an appropriate siting was found and
If we decide to go the overlay district route, how does that work? Because we're going to now,
that would need a town meeting, I believe.
Sure. And it would take some work to identify the locations for the district as well.
I worry that if we go that route, it might take too long. If we sit here and we say, wow, we have to do something, but because what we have is not good, and we want to do overlay districts, it sounds, but we don't have time to hit October, then why not kind of hold it up and do one of our marijuana, kind of just shut everything down for a while so we can get this, right?
Do a small
A
moratorium.
And go to town, and go to the special town meeting with a
Something
recommendation
solid.
for a moratorium and kind of put everything on hold, and do it right, because we already did it wrong one time, and I don't want to,
Yeah,
I want to make sure that we have the correct time to do it right, knowing,
I guess we should ask council that question.
So the Attorney General has approved zoning moratoriums through the end of this year. There has been one community as of right now that has received approval for a moratorium extending to the end of June of next year. However, that was a very qualified decision by the AG, and it is by no means supposed to be construed as sort of
Precedent.
open season on moratorium extensions. So I would be a little bit cautious about advising a moratorium, just because the AG has basically taken a position that communities, except under sort of extenuating circumstances, should be doing sort of all of their zoning and planning work and making their best effort to get these bylaws passed by the end of the year. In that one community, it was sort of extenuating circumstance based on timing of the town meeting vote versus a ballot vote, and sort of closing a loop on finalizing the zoning that they had started. So I'm not saying it wouldn't necessarily be approved, and you could make the case, but it's not a sure thing.
We had some experience with a moratorium last spring when we proposed a solar moratorium, and it essentially had very little effect because landowners were able to submit plans to gain protection from that zoning change. So it didn't really slow things down, and in fact, it sped up solar projects. So we could be looking at a similar kind of effect. Landowners could protect their land to the zoning in effect today and circumvent the moratorium.
Well, I think just disallowing it in agricultural zones is gonna go a long way to
I
what,
mean, if we're gonna go that way,
What's
we
gonna
take it right out of BEP too, and just have it in IG, that limits a lot. That it's much safer than.
Yep.
If we can't do the overlay and we can't do a moratorium, we wanna be safe, then we take it out, we say industrial. It's an industrial crop, it really is,
Mhm.
It
and
is.
so throw it in industrial.
Do we know how much of Charlton is zoned industrial?
If we were in our room, we would know.
I looked back at the board and it
Um,
wasn't there.
I did the same.
Mm.
I mean, I think that.
But I think it's an excellent suggestion, because that way, industrial zones are meant for all things industrial. There's no question that you're not in someone's backyard, you're not in someone's side yard, you are in an industrial zone. It is made for business.
Right, in the BEPs, a lot of them abut,
Yes.
homeowners, and
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, we're here to protect our citizens,
Yeah.
and that seems, so if we can't do this and.
Exactly.
And we're gonna get questioned, let's be legally more restrictive.
Exactly.
And then by doing that, the setbacks that were being questioned, the 500 feet and everything else, it's really getting away, there's no daycares.
I was just gonna
and-
say that.
There's no daycares and schools and
You're getting away from all of that.
from in just industrial only.
And then if in the future we decide to relook at that because there's a need to relook at that, that can always be relooked at when we have plenty of time to create the overlays to make sure that we do that properly.
Sure.
But I
sure.
love the idea of going just industrial.
Right, and
And
then,
that can-
and we do plan on going over our town zoning.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be a
Mhm.
project, so when we are looking at that, this can also be a piece and we can
Absolutely.
work on everything together.
Correctly.
So what's?
So what I'm hearing is you wanna limit recreational to 2, limit, everything else to 1, and keep it industrial, or still leave that open? That's what
I don't think we're
was-
talking about limiting the number if
Okay,
we're
so
going to
just
just
limiting it
allow
to
it.
industrial, limiting retail to 2,
And
medical to,
what we have today is 2 retail and 2 medical, so leave that alone.
So it's gonna just really,
Only
Push
be
it to
allowed in
industrial.
IG, that's it.
Exactly.
perfect, that sounds fine to me.
I think
We
that's
need a
great.
vote on that, Bill, or a
oh,
motion?
we have to let's get through
Alright.
all the rest of the comments in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
We won't vote on this because we're gonna have a public hearing on it.
Correct,
Yep.
gotcha. It's
So
just- all
this
right.
is just to get all the
Information.
information and
Yep.
to have our attorney review it again to make sure that it's gonna be a safe, a safe thing to do. And then what else is in here?
By moving it to industrial, you're going to negate many of these comments because they
Yep.
all have to do with the other
Right.
zones.
So, yeah, the other thing was the setbacks, but I guess that won't really be an issue
No.
anymore, so stay at the 500.
Number 6.
And honestly, the no establishment shall store or hold any product, I know that's controversial, and I know it was kind of, sort of like a reach out for help. I get it, but just because it's questionable and it's gonna keep this held up in the AG's office longer, I believe, can we just get rid of that?
Yeah, my understanding that in the beginning was that was a CCC requirement.
I
Maybe
thought
it
the
wasn't,
same,
maybe it was
yes.
early on and removed. Do you remember that
It's
being?
not a requirement.
It's not a requirement
No.
anymore, but I think it was part of the initial plan from them, and that's why we
I
had
don't
to
think
do
it's
it about it.
necessary.
But I,
Yeah.
it seems also awful restrictive. We don't restrict
Yes.
any other business from having
Exactly.
money in there.
During our public hearing, when we take comments, if, you know, everybody who's talking says we really, really, really wanna keep it in,
Well,
we
we
can, I
can
mean,
review it then, but,
we can review
you
it
know.
more, but at this point, if we can just get something that's, a big improvement, that's not gonna, you know, kind of cause any loopholes and,
Exactly.
protect the,
I think the
protect
banks
the
leave the
town.
money in there.
One
but I-
thing, yes.
And they have less security.
So,
So, we're good, so, if everybody wants to take it home and read again,
Yep.
and, we'll go,
Well, we need
Make those
to prepare the draft, and we need to decide a date on the public hearing,
okay,
because we have an October 15 town meeting.
Well, what are the
So-
the target dates that we need
What's
for
my-
advertisement?
what's my dates here? So
Okay.
what is the time frame from when we have to vote on it to when it goes to town meeting?
As long as the planning board is prepared to make a recommendation, it can be any time before town meeting. If the planning board does not make a recommendation within 21 days, then town meeting cannot vote on it. So if you're prepared to recommend even the day before town meeting, that's sufficient. So, but I think we should try to hold a hearing in early October, which will give us enough time to advertise
Yep.
and make sure the public has a chance to come and voice their opinions.
At the October meeting, Jean won't be here, but assuming that, because I want her to chime in on this, we all play a pretty,
Agreed.
we can't do the, obviously, the 17th is too late. Is September 19th too early?
Yes, we could do
We
the
can't
20,
advertise,
we
right?
could do the 26th,
Oh, and have
which
it,
is a separate meeting date.
do we really want to have another meeting?
I don't think it would hurt us to have one meeting directly devoted to this, because I have a feeling it's going to be a very popular meeting, and it's going to be a very busy meeting. So I think it would be, actually be a good idea to have one meeting where the only thing we discuss is this.
what, October 3rd?
Jean's
No,
not
Jean's
going to
not
be
gonna be
here,
Okay.
and that was why.
Okay.
And I think she'll be.
I caution on doing it too late, just so that we have
Right.
time to
Right.
revise it
Something.
and get it in for another public hearing
Agreed.
prior to the town meeting. That's the problem that we ran into before,
Correct,
is we didn't have time to make any adjustments,
right.
because
So-
it was we were up against the
If
wall.
we add a short additional meeting on September 26th,
I think you're being
Um,
optimistic that it's short, but I'd love to add another meeting.
is
I think that's
everybody
a good
okay with
idea.
that?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion, we add September 26th as a meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So,
One more question on this draft. Medical marijuana treatment centers. Right now, it's CB, IG, or BEP. Would that also be no across the board?
no across the board, is that
Or
okay?
would we continue to have that in IG, or?
Yes,
We would, treatment centers?
yes, because we're still allowing
So
two
it's-
treatment centers, so we have to have some district where they would be
Are we
allowed.
allowing 2 treatment centers? So what I'm hearing is that we don't need to allow treatment centers under the.
Well, we'll have one
statute.
with HealthWise.
Oh, that's not a treatment center.
It's a medical
It's a
marijuana
medical
treatment center.
marijuana.
Yes,
That's different though, right?
no.
No?
Is it- well, I'm sorry, what did you mean?
So, so that's retail dispensing and treatment. Is that what that's considered?
Well, there's retail marijuana, which is a marijuana establishment.
So there's,
And then there's a
there's a
medical-
treatment center excluding retail, and then there's a treatment center including retail. That does,
Right.
is that different than retail medical?
Is it like a pharmacy? Is it like a
Or is it like a
marijuana
spa?
pharmacy?
Yes, no, it's, so retail dispensing is basically your equivalent to your marijuana retailer on the adult use side. They're not going to be doing their growing or processing as part of that operation. It's gonna be where they're dispensed to patients. It's sort of sales-only facility.
So
But-
on line
but okay.
7, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. line
So
7.
you could have a medical marijuana treatment center without retail dispensing,
Which would be cultivation, processing.
just for medical
facility,
purposes.
Just for
Right.
medical purposes.
Okay.
But health-wise, there's a retail dispensary
Is the
in
retail
a
dispensary.
CB
Sure,
district.
Sure, okay,
So do you want to allow
that's fine. In-
medical treatment centers in CB?
I think stick it, everything in IG.
Just keep it all IG,
You know,
okay?
they're-
Keep it
So
they
that will
have
be a
that
non-conforming
grandfather.
use then, right?
It
Okay.
is what it is.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Right, so we have our, we'll advertise and be ready for September 26th to go over the public hearing, and everybody will have a chance to speak and chime in. In the meantime, when the new draft is done, we'll post it to our website, like we've been posting everything. Super transparent, that way you can write your bajillion notes on it and bring it to you to the next meeting. And definitely the emails and help understand, and so I can print them and get your thoughts. Don't hesitate to send the emails. I enjoy reading them at 2 o'clock in the morning.
I think we may consider booking the library if it's open as well, just so that we can maximize the number of
The
people.
library on Wednesdays has yoga,
That's right.
so that, unfortunately, they're never available, but
Available.
we can do it this way where we have a feed downstairs. So
Perfect.
I just want to make sure everybody sees.
Absolutely, yes.
Do I have the- Before I open the public hearing, I have a question that we wanted to ask, and it's kind of an, there is currently an open plan, a solar plan approved and kind of sitting out there on the same piece of property. And when we were kind of dealing with rescinding things and stuff, with 508, where we were required to rescind before we accept a new plan. So my question is, can we accept a new plan if we have a current active open solar plan on the same property?
By active solar plan, you mean it was approved as a special permit? Or
That's site plan approval, but not built.
it was a site plan approval, and is there any indication of the status of whether that is going to be constructed, or?
We believe it will be rescinded.
But we need to have our public hearing to have it rescinded, and we usually get a letter from our applicants. We actually had to extend a meeting because 508 had to do this. They had to wait the timeline. And I just want to make sure that if we set the precedent, to make sure that the rule is not to have two open plans
Right.
on a particular piece of property. I just don't want to be caught in anything
Correct.
saying, you guys are pushing something through when you didn't let 508 do it. So I don't know what the legality of it is, but I just want to make sure that if we're accepting and have a public hearing on this, that we're following all the rules.
Well, certainly, you can open your public hearing and you can take comment and hear the presentation. You may want to wait to act on it until the issue with the open approval is taken care of. Or you may want to consider a condition of the site plan approval, being that additional plan is resolved with respect to its status and what the intent is. But I don't think it would preclude you, there's no legal effect of you being precluded from opening a public hearing and hearing comment on an additional proposed use, with the understanding that, any action you may take on it may be contingent on that issue being resolved.
We weren't able to do it with 508,
Correct.
and I said I just want to make sure that if we set a precedent, that tomorrow in the paper, we're gonna be hearing, and this, I guess this shouldn't be a consideration, we're gonna be hearing that we're giving them special,
Attention.
special attention,
Treatment.
and treatment because of the size of the project. So, I mean, technically, the board can, what does the board think? Do we think that we should go ahead and wait for the reason? I mean, I think, honestly, the plan expires on October something.
So they may just let it expire.
But
But should we
again,
hold a public hearing
I think,
before?
we've got a lot of people here that wanna speak and wanna hear what's going on, so I think we should open the public hearing.
I mean, I think we know that plan won't go forward, so there's no reason to delay the action on the site plan.
so we have attorney on the record and the board, and so,
Sure.
I
So
will-
with that being said, if you are here for said site plan, please sign in.
Right. In accordance with section 200-7.1 and 200-7.2 of the Charlton zoning bylaw, the Charlton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, September 5th, 2018, at 7:30 PM in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, in the George C. McKinstry Building, 37 Main Street, Charlton, Mass., on the application of Valley Green Grow, 1600 Osgood Road, North Andover, Mass. 01845, for site plan approval for an indoor marijuana cultivation facility consisting of 860,000 square feet of closed greenhouse space, a 130,000 square foot post-harvest processing facility, and a 10,000 square foot cogeneration facility with a capacity of approximately 18 megawatts. The property is located at 44 Old Worcester Road, Charlton, Mass., and is listed as Assessors Map 36, Block C, lots 10 and 10.1. Said property contains approximately 94.6 acres and is zoned agricultural A and community business CB. Copies of the site plan application are available for inspection at the planning board office and the town clerk's office during regular business hours. Digital files are available on the planning board page of the Town of Charlton website. Any person interested or wishing to be heard should appear at the time and place designated. With that, VGG can please begin their presentation and
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, and members of the Planning Board. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Dan Leary. I'm the project manager who is leading off the presentation. I'm joined tonight by Michael Rosen, counsel for Valley Green Grow, and Michael Novak, who's our site civil engineer. If you would permit it, we'd like to propose sort of a short agenda that allows us to make, I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, we'll go.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, I want to make sure you can hear. That would propose us to sort of walk through at a very high level in under 20 to 25 minutes what we're proposing so that we can very quickly get to questions and comments. It's our intent at this point, so we don't have any comments or anything back from the peer review at this time. Our intent is to really answer those questions and any comments that come out tonight at the next hearing and do that in a more formal way. I mean, we'd welcome the chance to address anything that needs to be clarified tonight, but likely would be just sort of hearing what Charlton has to say. Thank you. I do have some slides. I'm not sure how well it's going to work on the side here, but hopefully you'll be able to see some images here in a moment.
Katie, do you want to come over?
Can we just do art? Can we just show these?
Do you mind?
Be more fun that way.
Thank you. So again, not to repeat what's already been said, we are Valley Green Grow. We're proposing a facility of approximately 1 million square feet, comprised of largely about 860,000 square feet of closed greenhouse facility, about 130,000 square feet of what's called post-harvesting and processing, and then 10,000 square feet of cogeneration. In, excuse me. So tonight, what I'd like to do is just read some highlights from our site plan narrative. For anyone that really wants to understand and get clarified on what we're doing, there's a 14-page narrative that was submitted with this application. It's available on the town's website, and it covers what we think is in plain English exactly what we want to do. I'd encourage everybody to read it, because tonight I'm just going to hit some highlights to keep this kind of short. The site is uniquely suited for this development because it has a natural gas pipeline underneath it, and that's going to allow us to pair the energy generating ability with this closed greenhouse structure and a reuse of an agricultural property. The proposed cannabis project is using what's called closed greenhouses. So unlike a typical greenhouse you might see that has vents that open up to the air, that's how they control their indoor environment, a closed greenhouse is not that. A closed greenhouse maintains a sealed environment, and it uses mechanical conditioning, so cooling and dehumidification, to treat the air inside. The reason for that is to have a much more precise control of the indoor growing conditions, as well as to keep out pests and problems that could impact the crop. But one of the biggest benefits of this type of construction and why it's so suitable for cannabis is because it allows us to have very good control over odor. Because of the odor mitigation systems that are built in the mechanical design, it keeps everything inside the building. The cogeneration is the second major piece to this, and essentially what that is the ability to produce the power on site from reciprocating engines. So the reciprocating engines use the natural gas that's on site to fuel it. It produces electricity that powers the lights that we'll be using inside the facility, as well as provide all the heat to cool and condition the property, to cool and condition the greenhouses themselves. So this pairing is an ideal use for this property. We have some images, because I think sometimes pictures can say a lot of words, and these images would show you exactly what's on the site plan itself, but these are renderings of the proposed property. This is a rendering from the top of the driveway. So at this time, this site plan proposes to use Alternative Drive as the main entranceway to the facility. That's again what's part of this submittal. I just want to get out ahead of that and say that of course we're looking at other ways to access the property. This is possibly not the only way to access the property, but at this time we have more research to do, namely working with other agencies to make sure that there's a safe way to access this site. And if that's possible, we would be happy to be proposing that hopefully in the near future. But this is the top of El Turner Drive as you're coming up from the site, and this is basically the main entrance that you would see as you approach the property. Of course, nobody in this room, unless you're by special guest, would ever get to this point because this is a highly secure facility. At this point right here, you'd be stopped by a security gate and guard. If you were standing on the north side of the property, essentially if you were about 30 feet above Route 20, looking to the south and to the east, this is what you would see from the north side of the property. These are the closed greenhouses and basically how they get situated and stacked together. Renderings are great, but seeing the facilities in real life leaves a much better impression, frankly, in my opinion. What you see here are some examples of very similar facilities that we've seen around the world. In fact, these are all from the Netherlands. These particular systems, in fact, our growing system is a Dutch growing system. It's a highly efficient system based on commercial indoor horticulture and adopting some of the best management practices from around the world. So what you see here in the top left example, that's what the entranceway to this type of greenhouse, this is how we envision it. This is the main entrance, so the visitor center, when we have registered visitors. What you see moving clockwise is how such a, an entranceway in what we call the head building attaches to the greenhouse. And down below you see other images of what these greenhouses look like. So from an exterior perspective, if you were up on the plateau in the secure area, this is what you would see, something like this. If you were invited inside, this is what you'd see. Let me do that. So starting on the at the 10 o'clock position or 11 o'clock position, that's the inside of a greenhouse. It's got rock wool cubes. In this case, growing plants directly on the concrete. That's what we're proposing inside the facility. You can see there in our plan, the room's approximately 12,000 square feet. So this is where we're putting the plants. Moving clockwise, this is what's called a technical room. A big part of this project is the reuse of water, which I'll get to in a minute. So this is the water storage, the nutrient storage to feed the crops. Moving down clockwise again is example of a cogeneration unit. So inside this big blue box down here in the bottom right is an engine that is paired with the generator inside this sound dampening container, which is the blue box that you see. So standing outside of this, it's very well sound dampened, and what you'll see as you read through our design and our narrative, that standing at abutting properties, you're not going to hear the cogeneration system. But this is what it looks like from the inside. Continuing clockwise, this is the entranceway to this particular facility. These are very, very well designed corporate structures fitting for the type of operation that will be happening here. This is a secure entranceway that's not only providing security, but also making sure that people coming into the facility are not bringing in contamination from the outside. The common concerns related to these types of projects, I have a list of them, and I'm just going to highlight them directly out of the narrative on page 6. The first one being odor, and as I mentioned, the design for containing the odor starts with getting the right type of facility. So the closed greenhouse, along with the mechanical system, and using activated carbon filtering and bipolar ionization are how we're able to keep the odors to within the building and not be a problem for any abutters. Water consumption, and I have an image here. Water consumption is largely to harness any rainwater that we're allowed to take from the roofs. It doesn't have to be recharged into the ground. Rainwater is the purest form of water, and it's the most valuable for our operations. So while on a daily basis there's water circulating through this 860,000 square feet of greenhouse constantly, because we're able to recapture over 85% of it, and probably north of that, we only have a requirement of under 30,000 gallons of new water a day. So that new water requirement is not a drain whatsoever on the Charlton resources, because it's largely coming from rainwater collection on site, and also in discussing this with the Charlton Water Department and Southbridge Water Departments, we'll be able to connect into the main to support and supplement that in periods of extended drought. Energy consumption, as I mentioned, this is not putting a drain on the local grid, because we're producing the energy on site. 100% of the energy that we're using in this facility is coming from our cogeneration. And in fact, it's not just the energy. So even the exhaust from the cogeneration engines we're able to use, they have carbon dioxide. This exhaust is carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas. In this operation, our plants need carbon dioxide, so we're using scrubbers to pull the carbon dioxide out of the exhaust and inject it right back into the plants. It helps them grow. So the overall efficiencies, I'm an engineer by background, but the overall efficiencies of this project are kind of off the charts because of our ability to reuse so much of the waste streams. Security at the site is overseen by not just the local departments, but also the state. The state oversees security. There's going to be a 24/7 manned security operation at the site. Guards there every day, and Mike Novak can get into the fence and some of the other details of it. You know, the state requires, as part of our license, to show a security plan for that includes access control, hundreds of cameras, and other anti-diversion measures to make sure that it's safe for the community. Light pollution is a question that we also get questions about. Light pollution might be, for example, if somebody designed a greenhouse and turned on lights in the middle of the night and lights came up from the greenhouse. That's not acceptable, and that's not part of our plan. Our plan utilizes what's called dark curtains. These are curtains that get deployed over the tops of the greenhouse, except when there's natural light available. So while we do have a lot of supplementary lights, LED lighting inside the greenhouse to provide the plants, whenever those lights are on and we're not harvesting daylight, so in the day, these shade curtains are drawn. It's an automatic system that's part of the building control system, and that ensures that light is not able to come up through the greenhouse at night. You're not going to see light pollution coming from the greenhouse itself. And traffic is certainly a big topic. In fact, I think we're going to propose that maybe if you'd find it acceptable that we dedicate one of our meetings to discussing this. We have completed a traffic study based on the plan that's been submitted for the 250 parking spots and the employees that were, 150 employee shifts that we have working at the facility. And I think the traffic study does a good job of outlining what this project would look like, and that we feel that would be an acceptable levels of traffic for this project. As a final couple of points, I just wanted to show an image, because I know this is another major concern. What are we going to see if we're, neighbors? So if we're driving down Old Worcester Road to the south side of the property, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to see all of this on the same screen. Hold this in a little bit better. So if you can see on the bottom right-hand side there, you have a couple vehicles. That's representative of Old Worcester Road. This is a Revit design drawn to scale. This is using a 3D model, using the exact elevation drawings that are in the site plan. So that gives you a scale of the size of the greenhouse, which you see in the top left next to a human being. So these are 26-foot tall greenhouses, and what the line of sight would look like. And I asked the designers to show us the worst case scenario for coming around the property. Where is somebody going to see this? So hopefully that gives you an example. And this image can be, again, found in the narrative if you couldn't see it up here. And finally, I wanted to understand what would this look like if you were standing at the Charlton Orchard Farms driveway right now with the beautiful pin oaks standing right in front of you, and you were to look up from this, and what would you see of the greenhouse facility itself? And if you can see off to the sort of 10 o'clock position, you can just see the peaks of the greenhouses. We feel that this is a worst case. This is before any of our landscaping mitigation measures have even been designed into it. So we think we can further hide the facility from the neighbors. So with that said, I'd like to pass the presentation over to Mike Novak.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Is that okay, level-wise? Okay. Again, for the record, Mike Novak from Meridian Associates. As Dan said, I'll try to keep this brief, hit some of the major points, point out what I think is relevant to just orientate everyone, and then be happy to go over anything in detail after that. If you don't mind, I'm just going to turn to face the screen. I think it'll be a little easier, and I'll be able to read my notes. So, go ahead and switch to the next slide. So we'll start with existing conditions. I think a lot of people are familiar with the site, but just to give everyone kind of an overview. Again, we're dealing with 44 Old Worcester Road. It's actually comprised of two lots. The smaller lot here, Lot 1, and then that has a few of the buildings and another home here. And then the larger outline of the lot, which does not include this blank space, is why this isn't colored, and then through from east to west all the way through and back down around a bunch of frontage along Old Worcester Road. Couple things real quick I'd like to point out. Obviously, the topo is there. Everyone's familiar with the two large peaks, and then sloping from east to west off to the sides. We have had the entire site delineated by a wetlands consultant. Those are the blue areas you see there. Those are what is considered jurisdictional wetlands from the Wetlands Protection Act. There's a very large system on the west side, which essentially cuts the larger lot in half. Anyone who's been there is familiar with the stone wall. That's pretty much where the wetland is. It's usually how these older sites work. And then we have some smaller fingers on the edges and a small piece up in the front. The lighter green is more of the open area. The darker green is more of the tree-covered area, just to, again, give everybody an idea of what the difference in colors is. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, back up 1 second. And just to orientate everyone again, Dan mentioned the gas line, and the easement for that is located on the eastern side of the property, right in this general area. Sorry, the dash line is a little faint. I probably should have colored that, but as you can see, it's right there. Again, one of the draws of the property.
Yeah, Ms. Novak, can you speak up a little bit?
Absolutely. Yep,
A little
sorry.
hard to hear.
No problem. Better? Yeah. Okay. I'll get nice and close. Go ahead, Dan. So here's just a general layout of the site, and taking some of the more detail off to orientate everyone again. Here is Alterna Road, the entrance that exists now. The orange in the middle is the greenhouses, along with the areas that Dan mentioned, cogen and the head house and vegetation and so on and so forth. Couple of major site points I'd like to point out. As we come into Alterna Road, Dan mentioned that in his view of the cross-section, we had a security fence. Right here is a gated security entrance. And you'll notice it's a little small. I apologize. There's a small turnaround. If for any reason someone comes up there that they're not supposed to, they should be able to turn around with relative ease. As you enter, again, the main entrance of the building here, visitor parking, handicap parking. As we move to the west, a loading area, 4 loading bays, some other bays for deliveries of non-tractor trailer type. And you'll notice that there's a gray path that runs the entire length, or I should say perimeter of the building. That's a 24-foot wide access road, part of a fire department review and request. The final location of that obviously will be determined with the fire department and through their turning radiuses and so on and so forth, but that was put there as a first pass. And again, the parking area to the north, abutting Old Worcester, Worcester Road, Route 20. Laid out in conformance with your parking requirements. Approximately total spaces on site 263, but that also includes handicap and visitor, as I mentioned in the front. Go ahead. One more. Not working?
Oh, it's getting there.
Okay. Sorry, a little technical difficulty of moving to the next slide. There we go. So, same view, same layout. The only difference here is we've added the grading on here to give everyone an idea of the limits of disturbance. It's a little tough to see, I apologize. But the grading limits we're running through here basically run out to the edge of the right-of-way lines on the north, and to the west, they go down to the stone wall, as I mentioned before. We tighten up a little bit and then expand down to Old Worcester Road in here, and then tighten up again and try to, the idea was to try to maintain as much of the perimeter as we possibly could. In some portions, we were able to maintain enough, or at least more than we would hoped, and in some portions we weren't. The next couple of slides are just blow-ups, because those are very hard to see. A couple quick things I'd like to point out again. This is the north section, Worcester Road here, Route 20, parking area. I'd like to point out a couple. These blue boxes are subsurface infiltration systems. They'll be handling the runoff for stormwater that is not collected from the cisterns. So we have a balancing act of meeting stormwater requirements because of the wetlands, along with the requirements of the facility itself. So we, again, without peer review, I don't know how much detail we want to get into, but I just wanted to point out that it is there. Go ahead. And then, again, the southern side of the site, entrance here. You can see a little bit more of the fence. The fence will run along the top of the plateau on the outside of the fire access lane. That's where we're proposing for now. There's obviously room for changes if we feel as though landscaping could be moved to better serve some of the views and so on and so forth, but obviously security is a big part of it as well. Go ahead. Again, just more blow-ups. One of the things I wanted to point out on this slide, a little easier to see, is these are the locations we're proposing for the cisterns. I think you had a picture of those earlier to have an idea of what those are, but that's the location. Again, we tried to keep those as far away from residences as we could. Go ahead. One more. Keep going. So again, this is our first pass on overall landscaping plan. Wherever we had space between the access road and the fence, we tried to fill in. The areas inside the access road to the building will be just a manicured lawn. That's the idea. So this isn't a sea of pavement other than the buildings. In the parking area, we're trying to put as much green as we can back. Parking lot planted as required, along with perimeter planting, again, just to try to soften or obscure any looks or views that we could see. First pass again, but that's what the intent of this is. You can see the drainage layout for the parking and so on and so forth to mitigate stormwater runoff as well. Again, just to blow up to show you wherever we found some spots, we tried to plant. Again, this is on the top of the berm, so hopefully the height of these plantings will obscure views. I think this is a rendering of the proposed site as the greenhouses look, with the parking again to the north and entrance to the south at Alvel Turner Road. Again, I hope it represents a little bit more of how the spaces that are, and this was actually an older version where we had the access road tight to the building. Per comments of, initial comments from fire, we backed it off of the building, and so instead of it being tight to the building, whoa. That's okay. I think we can move on. Is there any, so I think at this point, again, this was a very quick, broad overview of the site. Be happy to answer any detailed questions that may come up or that I missed that you're not sure of at this point. I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Rosen to kind of sum up where we wanted to go from here.
Do you want to turn the lights back on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the end of the
Yeah.
slides. Thank you.
I'm just going to show you. Oh, that was excellent. Not bad. Hi, my name's Michael Rosen, counsel for Valley Green Grow. So I wanted to talk a little bit about process. One thing we're concerned about is making sure that we get this board and the citizens of Charlton all of the information they need and deserve to assess the site plan. We know we submitted an application with all of the materials that were required, and that application is in excess of 1,000 pages. I think that, there's a lot of information there, and I think that managing and making sure that everyone has access to it and has the ability to identify the appropriate location within that package of documents is of the utmost importance. Dan alluded earlier to the fact that we did do a 14-page summary, but that is truly what it was intended to be, which was a summary for somebody that wants to get a quick review of the general topical elements of the project. So what I wanted to suggest was, in order to keep some type of organization, again, for the members of the board and the community, is that we break future hearings down into topical hearings. And what we wanted to do is do three, you proposed 3 different meetings, one that
deals with environmental impacts, those 6 things that Dan mentioned earlier: odor, water, energy, security, light, but not traffic. We would do 5 of the 6. We would propose a second meeting that generally deals with all of the other community impacts that are non-site, environmental specific. And then the third meeting, we would propose to do traffic, access, and security. The other thing that we would propose is that people present their questions, but so that things don't get out of hand and get pulled in multiple different directions, especially because we haven't gotten feedback yet from peer review. So what we were thinking is we would compile the questions. We would then, after the meeting, in addition to taking notes during the meeting, we would go back after the meeting and rewatch the meeting, and then be prepared to answer those questions at one of the future meetings, whether it be 3 or more than 3, but based on the topics that evening. Again, this way, so that we're not trying to direct people to somewhere within a more than 1,000-page document. This way, we could actually get them the precise reference, the precise document, and we could effectively answer both your questions and the audience's questions. We do, one thing we would, mention is that obviously as people are commenting or questioning, to the extent that we have a quick, simple answer to a question, obviously we could answer it straight off the bat. By way of example, to the extent that there's something that's just not correct and we know off the bat it's not correct. I think, for instance, one of the rumors that we heard this week was how are we going to deal with having 50-foot light poles on the property? Well, we're not going to have 50-foot light poles on the property, and it's not shown on the plans as 50-foot light poles, so that if there were a comment or a concern raised of that nature during the question, we might just briefly say, we can assure you they're not 50-foot light poles, and we will show you that on the hearing where we go through environmental conditions of the site. And then when we get to that hearing that night, we would direct you to the appropriate plan. We would put pictures up on the screen. And this way we could organize the answers so that you effectively get the information you want, rather than, for lack of a better term, chaos. So with that, I hand it back to the board, and at your pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we do have a pretty standard process. The one night subject per meeting seems a little bit aggressive. We've done a few other big projects, nothing of this size, and we clearly need more than one night per subject, and it's probably only because when we're here till 11 p.m., everybody's minds kind of, they're not clear, and this is the biggest of its kind. It's hard for me to find any other examples in North America, so I want to make sure that we are looking at everything in detail. So if we look at traffic, and traffic takes 3 nights, traffic takes 3 nights. If it takes a half a night, then good, and we're done. Slow and steady. So there'll be multiple, and this is for the audience also. So we're not just looking at everything with our own little expertise. We're bringing in experts on every single subject matter. There will be traffic engineers, there'll be odor engineers, there'll be sound engineers. We have our town consultant who reviews these plans, Graves Engineering. They're fabulous. They've been doing work for us for as long as I can remember. We're also going to bring in an environmental specialist, because this just has huge impact, and lucky for us, in the host agreement, BGG will cover all these costs. So again, we want to make sure that we don't miss anything, and we have great opinions, but we just knowing the facts certainly make a difference. As for tonight, normally we have our engineer talk about, review the plan and then talk to us, and we go over each item. Just because of the sheer size of the plan, he wasn't able to do that. So a lot of our questions would have been, if we were sitting up here as a board, would have been based on his review. Because that's not happening, my thoughts were to open it up to the residents, because I want the abutters to ask their questions. They're the ones that are most affected. I just want to clearly state, I need everybody to be calm, not show personalities and tempers, just questions. I'm hoping BGG can answer most of those questions. If they can't answer, they'll have to answer they don't know, and they'll look back. Again, let's just be reasonable. And with that, I think that we'll open it up to our abutters. Please clearly state your name and your address, and hopefully everybody has signed our sign-in sheet.
Do you want us to stay up here to answer, or do you want?
Yeah, that's perfect. And
Okay.
so just, do we want people
I have a
to?
quick question. Yeah, I was going to say, I think we should put a chair or something so people can come up and ask them directly.
Why don't we put a chair here?
Pull up a bridge, like a chair.
Real quick, well, actually, I have two questions while we wait for the abutters. I see that there's mention of a security fence. Will that go entirely around the perimeter and have people monitoring that?
I can answer some of that. It will go around the entire perimeter. I think Dan needs to jump into that.
The perimeter, so we were trying to design it to be respectful of the neighbors and the neighbors' views.
Yes.
So the thought was to put it around the perimeter of the plateau.
Okay.
Not the perimeter of the site.
Okay.
And then we would look to put some type of screening,
Okay.
and it would be monitored by the security.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the greenhouses themselves will be securely locked, I'm
Oh,
presuming?
yes.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
And then, you mentioned a great point about having the questions presented after. Might I open the idea of having the questions presented before as well? So if abutters, if neighbors, if town residents have questions, they can email them to the planning board, to Jane specifically. She can then forward them to you, so you come in preparation, so people know that their questions will be answered specifically. Because sometimes these public hearings, I don't want to say get out of hand, but if we don't, it might be difficult to give everyone a chance to talk, but if they can stay home and watch TV, there might be childcare issues. If they know their question is going to be answered, I think it'll make people feel a lot better that they're being heard.
I think absolutely. Again, the more organized we can
Exactly.
be,
Yes.
whether you like the answer or not.
Correct.
We want you to get the factual answer,
Because
whatever it is.
I think it's extremely important that we're not here to discuss whether we like marijuana or not. We're here to discuss your project.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Check, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Art Longden. I live at 7 Morton Station Road, literally a stone's throw from the proposed facility. So I just want to review briefly what I think I heard today, and I'll ask you to confirm when I'm done. I believe that what I've heard, and then correct me on any mistakes that I may have made. So first off, I heard about, based upon the elevation maps that you showed in the presentation, I should not be able to see the facility from the road. Secondly, I understand there'll be no light pollution based upon the technologies that are being implemented into the greenhouses with the black curtain technology during the nights and using natural sunlight during the day. I'd like to know if that's true. I also heard that based upon your studies in the sound area, I shouldn't hear anything or have any noise pollution as a result of the cogeneration facility, the traffic that may occur, and any other processing that might occur at the facility at this time. I shouldn't, as I already, this is a repeat, but I shouldn't see anything, okay? So if I'm a casual observer coming through town and down my road, I shouldn't see anything. Questions regarding smell. I understand that based upon the technologies being used and the filtration used and the reuse of all the variables in there, I should not smell anything from the facility in terms of pot, odor, diesel, rotting animals, or anything of that nature, okay? Based upon your plan, I see that this is a secured facility with fencing completely surrounding the facility with a guarded gate up to the driveway and landscaping designed to protect and hide the facility for all. I also understand there should be no pedestrian or vehicular traffic or traffic of any kind on the site. So also, I understand that the traffic study will follow, so you've already started the process of a traffic study, and that review will follow. I'm worried about excess water use, but what I think I heard is there'd be no excessive water use. In fact, the only water use that this should be sustained will be from potable water, maintenance water, bathroom facilities, things of that nature from an outside water usage. So all your water usage should be self-contained from the cisterns, from the rainwater, and the only time that you may need additional water would be in times of severe drought, upwards of I believe you said 3 to 4 months, and I'll hope for some clarification on that. I did not hear anything about a fire suppression system, but I'm going to ask, is that included into the plans? Let's see. I do have a question about cogeneration. Is there anywhere else locally that's currently using cogeneration? And if so, could you comment on where and what that is in terms of how it compares to your facility? Let's see. I think that's all the comments I have for you, so I'd appreciate if you could address those comments and please correct me where I'm wrong and add any additional information that you might. Thank you.
I'll try, and then I'll look at each of you, because there were a lot of questions there. So, elevation view. So do we have anything that we can show them as to what the view might look like? So the theory is from where the houses are, you're going to be looking up a slope that has trees on a slope. You would then have to be able to curve your eyesight to see the plateau. So, yep. All right. Well, you do that. Yeah. So the question was light pollution. We will not, there will be no light pollution, and we will show that during all of the environmental peer review analysis, so that is correct. Sound pollution, we will be compliant. Can I promise him that he will never hear an engine of a truck that pulls up the street? No, and that's not what we said. But the production of the facility will absolutely be sound compliant, and there will be no noise pollution. I know one of the big concerns was, well, you're going to have generators there. Those generators are in rooms, inside the buildings, and designed to recapture everything coming out of those generators, including the carbon monoxide. Kind of same with odor pollution. It's designed the same way, so we will be compliant from sound pollution, light pollution, odor pollution. The facility will be secured by fencing, again, around the perimeter of the plateau. We don't want to put fencing down by the road. We want to leave as much, and I think we looked at the distances. It's anywhere from like 250 to 410 feet. Is that correct? We looked at all of the surrounding homes to see how far they were. Okay. So they're 250, 340, 350, 410, so 250 to 410.
We looked at, go back one day. We looked at this house here, 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 and here. These are, sorry.
So we wanted to give the distance from those homes to the closest viewable, constructed,
right.
So it's the fence, and those are the distances.
Yep. Again, those are the GIS locations of the houses. We've surveyed everything else, so we're comfortable where the property lines are. So we were able to put them in, I would say, relatively close. I rounded up to very large whole numbers, and the closest horizontal distance is here at about approximately 250 feet. But again, there's also a 60 to 70-foot incline there as well. So I'm hoping Dan can pull up. I did prepare a couple cross-sections based on our topography, our survey, and I hope it gives a representation of what we're trying to talk about. But
so when you're ready, we'll go to you, and then I'll go back and pick up on item number 6.
Yeah, so this particular cross-section is, as you can see, the line is through this part of the building from Old Worcester Road. I apologize, it's why I didn't include it in the presentation, because it's a little tough to see because of the scale, but I'll do my best. So this is the slope here. The roadway is down on the left-hand side. We go up the slope, fence, small little line, landscaping behind it. I apologize for the crudeness of it. Driveway access, and I'm actually having trouble seeing it myself. This is the
Stormwater recharge?
yeah. You can see right here is that we're in the space that actually has quite a bit of distance from the security access road to the building. So you can see with this exaggerated scale, the building is here. So again, you're looking here, 6-foot person looks up. They're looking up past and over the treetops, and the building is set back. I don't have the scale in front of me, but we're looking at probably 50 to 70 feet beyond that. I can't do that at every spot. We'd be here forever to go through it. So we picked some spots that we hope were representative. This is the goal. This is the idea. This is the approach. I think it's something that we'll have to continue to develop and look for holes. If we find them, fill them in. But the intent of the design to put this in the middle of a plateau is to have this effect around the perimeter. And I hope that at least may not answer the question, but hopefully it clarifies it a little bit.
So you did have one rendering where you could see the tops of the greenhouses.
Yeah, again, that's what we're going to look for. We're going to have to look for those angle points, those spots that there may be if you stand at the right way in the right direction at the right place. There's a hole, and we need to fill it.
I would point out that that was, I believe, on El Turner Road. I'm sorry, I believe that was from on El Turner Road, not from down on Old Worcester Road. We were kind of showing you,
Yeah, okay.
kind of exposing ourselves and saying, as you come up the road, when you get to a certain point, you'll start to see the tops of the peaks of the buildings.
And in the absence of the landscaping that was built into the design, so.
Okay. 6 was no pedestrian or vehicular access on the site. So actually, there will be access for people that are allowed on the site. There won't be access for anybody that's not allowed on the site. So when you get up to the plateau to where the gate is, no one will be allowed. And I believe what Mr. Novak described was we actually, at the security gate, we have an area for cars to turn around and essentially be directed off-site. So depending on what you call the site, if you call the site everything inside the fence, there will be no non-permitted approved vehicular or pedestrian access outside of the fence. Yeah, I am not going to sit here and tell you that no one will ever drive up the road and try and get. Traffic study, there was a comment that the traffic study isn't done yet, but that it will be presented at some point in the future. That's actually not correct. The traffic study is done, and it is in the package. That it has been submitted, and it is being peer reviewed. However, what we are doing is we are looking at and trying to find any other possible or potential alternatives to supplement. Yeah. Okay, so, and we also, when we commissioned the traffic study originally, which was months ago, it did include retail at the other portion of the property that is not part of our application, and so that actually we'll probably get some revision to the traffic study, we're getting it, that will reduce the traffic impact. Yep, it's your traffic study.
The reason that it was done when it was done was the idea was to capture the school traffic. So we hurried up and we got it done in the beginning of June in order to have an accurate depiction of the school traffic that goes through here in the morning and in the afternoon. So it predated kind of the final development side. And then once we had the wetlands delineated, which was behind the traffic study, we realized that the west-hand side was pretty much, was going to be much more challenging. So we decided to remove the dispensary. So I just wanted to establish the timeline so we understand why the traffic study needs to be revised. But we've collected the data that we needed to be able to do that by doing it prior to school being released. So just a clarification.
Next question was on potable water and cisterns. So Dan, did we say we would be using roughly 30,000 gallons per day, and that other than in drought situations, that's the most? Or was that 30,000 gallons a day during drought situations and at no other time would be using water? Because I think Mr. Longan might have not had it technically accurate based on how you...
I believe it was not exactly as I said it, but what will be happening is the new water requirement that we cannot recapture for the facility, new water requirement on a daily basis is under 30,000 gallons per day. That water would be primarily coming from rainwater recapture. But in addition to that, and with discussions that we've been having with the water department and the Southbridge department, and this sort of leads into the next comment, which is about fire suppression. There's a requirement to have not only potable water for the commercial operation, as as Mr. Long had mentioned, but also to provide fire suppression and to have that pressure available for sprinkler systems where required. So there is a plan for that. It's going to certainly require on a daily basis some sort of supplementary water from the municipal department, and those details are still being worked out with the municipal department.
And then the 10th comment was about local cogeneration facilities for comparison. So I'm going to suggest that our Vanderweil Engineering, Michael Thornton, who's designing this for us, did not join us tonight. We did excuse half of our team tonight, knowing that the peer review wasn't done. So we didn't want to have everybody here for no reason, but I will put that on the list. As I said, we'll compile questions and we will answer them. So Mr. Longen's question about cogeneration and comparison, we will have Michael Thornton from Vanderweil answer it at a future meeting. I think that was it.
My comment just from that, I expected to see a curb cut onto 20. I drive that road every single day, and I can't, I'm anticipating the traffic, our engineers' review of the traffic study. A lot of that seems, when you see it on paper sometimes, it doesn't go with what you know in real life. So, was it just cost? What was the reason why Route 20 wasn't used? Because it would be such a huge relief off of all of those abutters to not have all that additional traffic on Old Worcester Road.
Sure. It was, there's wetlands, there's topography, and there's Mass DOT.
So I'll open, again, we wanted to reserve this time specifically for the abutters, so if there are more comments, please.
I'm not technically an abutter, but can I ask a
Oh,
question?
yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Kristen Costigian. I saw the part about the cogen, and I wanted to ask, I didn't see any renderings of cooling towers. Do you have those included in the design?
They, yes, ma'am, they're on the site plan, but we can get some images and renderings of the cooling towers, absolutely.
How tall, roughly, do you think these things are gonna be?
If you don't know, and I mean, we don't have Vanderweil Engineering tonight, and they designed it. If you know with certainty, answer, and if not,
You were the engineer, I'm sorry.
we have an energy, yeah.
Okay, so, the water for the cooling towers is coming from the cisterns, or?
Some of that water will be coming from the rainwater makeup. Some of that water will be coming from the municipal source.
All rainwater is stored in cisterns or lagoons, or?
We label them as cisterns, and let me see if I can pull up an image that I didn't. I had an image, but I don't think I actually called it out very well to show what a typical, excuse me.
Do you want to tell you what slide it is? Seventh slide, that is water collection.
The old-fashioned way.
There you go.
Yes, ma'am. So what you see here is, you could call it a lagoon. It's a rainwater collection area. We label them as cisterns on the map. What it is it's a terrain feature built into the ground. Most of the rainwater stored is actually below ground. In this case, it's lined with both geotechnical membrane as well as a liner. Maybe think of this as a swimming pool. The top is covered, and it's covered in order to prevent any biological, defense, from contamination that we don't want to have coming into this. So this water is all processed coming from here. Also, let me also add that when I said that the water for the cooling towers was coming from makeup rainwater, it's actually, it was my mistake. It's coming from the cogeneration combustion condensation, because, you know, in the natural gas, there's quite a bit of water that'll come from combustion, so that actually gets reused into the cooling towers.
Some of it does, but some of it evaporates, so there is usually a water need. That's open, that's not open air, you're saying that's covered, so it's not a giant mosquito pond? Is that what you're telling me? I'm
Yeah.
asking.
What do you mean giant mosquito pond?
What is it, so what prevents that from being a giant bug hatchery? If you have big security lights and then you have giant open-air water tanks, what makes that not a mosquito hatchery?
We're not going to have big security lights.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we're not making presumptions. But yeah, if this were a mosquito hatchery, we would be out of business. We couldn't use the water.
Okay.
So
So how do you prevent?
It's controlling the water so it doesn't turn into, you know, it's keeping algae out, keeping out, you know, things like bird droppings, things that could contaminate the water that we don't want to get contaminated. So this is a commonly used part of commercial agriculture, is to cover and to line these to keep them, keep the water quality that we need.
So I guess I would just follow with Mr. Longden and say, could you find me an example locally of something like that? These giant lagoons locally. Do we have these in Massachusetts?
So we'll see if we can find something.
Thank you. And then my last question was, you guys refer to the plateau a lot. How much elevation are you talking about shaving off the top of this hill in feet, roughly? Do you know?
You don't have plans up, so it's a little easier with a visual, but if you recall from the existing conditions, there's two knobs that are much higher than the rest of the area, so we're going to bring those down. It varies across the 50, 60 acres that we're changing, but on average, it's about 20 to 25 feet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Margaret Russell, 63 Old Worcester Road, about 250 feet from the nearest building on your plan. You talk about changing the elevation, but I have a question about the change in the pitch, the current change in the slope. Will your redesign, re-engineering change the slope?
Could I just ask you to clarify what you mean by change the slope? Yeah, are you talking about, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I just want to understand the question, that's all.
Well, we live downhill from the orchard currently, right on Old Worcester Road, and I'm just wondering if the pitch of the land will change on that hill in front of the houses to Old Worcester Road.
You're on this?
Yeah, yep.
So the slope from the access drive, the security drive on the plateau, down to Old Worcester Road, the natural slope that's there now will be altered. It'll be 3 to 1 or greater. We have some smaller sections, we have some sections of 2 to 1, but I don't believe they're in that area. I'd have to double check my grading plan. So yes, they will change, but they'll be stabilized with permanent stabilization blankets and then seeded with, right now the plan is to do a meadow mix, which is basically a longer grass to allow for a little bit more of a slope stabilization and to kind of try to get back to a little more of a natural look. Wherever we can avoid going all the way out, we will. As I mentioned in my presentation, there are some areas, but in your general area where you pointed to, that slope will be altered. If I understand your question, yes, correctly. No, but I think we should probably let the peer review have their comments, and then I'd be happy to address any of their concerns along with that question at that time, if that's okay.
2 other items. The traffic study you said was done before school got out. However, the seniors were already gone when you did your traffic study in early June. We had seniors who drive to Bay Path, Shepherd Hill, and come that route from the other side of town, come down Old Worcester Road, Morton Station Road. They were not included. And my question is, why was there not an AM peak traffic study done? The traffic study says there was a PM peak, a Saturday peak, but nothing was done in the morning.
I'll review that traffic study and that comment and have clarification when we bring up the traffic and we revise the counts as well. I mean,
Just
yeah.
one quick question, just if I heard you correctly. Your question was about Saturday morning?
Yeah, Saturday
Okay.
was in the traffic.
A Saturday
was in
AM
the
peak.
traffic study, a midday, an afternoon study, but nothing was done in the morning.
Okay, okay.
And in the morning, you missed all the seniors driving to school,
In the morning, weekdays.
weekdays.
Preferably not during school vacation.
He was specifically saying Saturdays, weekdays, mornings.
Your question was no AM peak Saturdays or no
No
AM peak
AM
any
peak
day?
at all, any day.
Okay, that's what because I heard Saturday and they were in the middle and I wanted to make sure. Okay, any day?
Any
Okay.
day.
Yep. Okay.
That was one of my questions also, and we're probably going to request that that be done, so.
Yep.
The other question I have was regarding perimeter lights. Page 11 of your narrative, number 4, says, in order to make the 50-foot poles surrounding the exterior of the property less obtrusive, the poles will be placed as close as possible to the tree lines, as constructed in accordance with final approved site plans.
Then they have a typo on the summary.
Okay,
Yep.
so I was not incorrect
Nope.
to say there was a 50-foot.
So I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm glad we asked the question. We will make sure that gets corrected.
Thank you very much.
Shoot the typos.
Good evening. My name's Ed Kochling. I live at 47 Hanson Road. My name is Ed Kochling. I live at 47 Hanson Road. The first question would be, are you planning on filing with MIPA for this project? Are you planning on filing with MIPA for this project?
We are exploring that right now, and it is a distinct possibility.
Well, for a project of this magnitude, and the fact that everybody wants to be thorough and, you know, dot the i's and cross the t's, I would think that it would be a necessity.
I don't believe it's a necessity, but we are exploring that right now, and as I said, I think that is a distinct possibility.
Sir, we will have an environmental specialist, also a consultant, and if the environmental specialist, once that happens, then, you know, we'll, obviously our consultant will manage that well to make sure that if it needs to happen, it happens.
Okay, I'm under the understanding that the state requires it for certain size projects that trigger, pardon me. I'm under the impression that the state requires that you file with MIPA if you hit the thresholds and there's a state action on the project. So I don't know, it's really, I'm not sure if the environmental consultant for the town really has a say in that.
It will be reviewed in very much detail, and that's not something that will be missed.
Very, very good, thank you very much. Do you plan on filing an NOI with the Conservation Commission? Do you plan on filing an NOI, a notice of intent, with the Conservation Commission in town?
Yes.
Now, I have a few questions about the recycling that you proposed in your documents on this Pakashi fermentation. What can you tell me about that?
Do you know, or do we?
We can provide some more detail in the future. As part of the narrative, we referenced a City of Denver Best Management Practices Guide from our operators that are operating in Colorado. And from this guide, there's a suggestion to use anaerobic digestion as a way to manage and break down the organic waste, the parts of the plant that are not used on site. So it's our desire to minimize all traffic coming in and out of the facility. One way to do that is to anaerobically digest in sealed containers that material on site. So we get the water out, the water stays on site so that the material is minimized, so we can minimize the trucks that have to come in to remove the waste from site.
It's my understanding from doing some research on it that in order to do bokashi fermentation, you would have to probably amend the materials on site with food waste. So is there any plan to bring food waste to the site?
I didn't totally understand your question. I couldn't hear it. I'm sorry.
So in order to perform bokashi fermentation, you're going to have some additives added to your mixture in order to create that reaction and get the fermentation. Typically, it's used for food waste fermentation. Does that mean do you guys have any idea if you're going to bring food waste into the facility to get that reaction so that it will break down?
No.
No food waste. You also indicated that you were going to be using rock wool as your growing media. Are you aware that rock wool is not biodegradable? And it's a man-made product? And your plan, I believe, calls for you to shred that and mix it with the growing meat or the plants and try to recycle that, but it's actually, like I said, it's not biodegradable. That's number one. Number two, according to the EPA, it's considered to be a Group B substance, which means that it's a possible carcinogen for humans. And grinding it up and making it airborne is about the worst thing you can do with it. So I wanted to bring this to your attention just so that before you do more with it, that you do a little more homework on it. As for the construction,
Sir, if I could, because I think it's important, I don't want anybody here to leave today with the impression that we're proposing rock wool is something that could be harmful to humans. We can provide some more information on that. Rock wool is made from lava rock. It's organic by nature. How it is commonly used in this industry, and I even showed some images of how it's used in large-scale horticultural agriculture, addresses some of the things you said, so we don't agree with characterization of it, that it's going to be harmful to our employees, but we can present some more information on that in the future. Thanks.
So the information that I've read says that it was originated with lava rock, but that's not how it's created today. It actually states that it's a substance made by taking chalk and rock and heating them to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It is then spun and cooled and turned into a material you see the hydroponics stores use. So it's not lava rock. It's not really, that's where it was discovered, but that's not exactly what you're using.
So if I could ask for the reference on that, and I'll have our professionals look into it.
Very good. I'll give it to you after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
One of my other big concerns is that typically with projects of this magnitude, they get portrayed at the meeting of what you start with and what you're finishing with. My big concern is that, in between, how do you get there? And all the issues that can be caused, along that way, especially erosion. There's very sensitive in this area where there's wetlands all around you. Looking at your erosion control plans, I had a number of comments, which I'll be more than happy to give you after the meeting, but they seem, in my opinion, to be deficient. Basically, you have, compost socks around the site at the base of 3-to-1 and 2-to-1 slopes. They're just I'm an engineer. I've managed sites like this before. That's just not going to hold up. So I would ask you guys to take a look at what you plan to do with that, like your downshoots that you want to use. I mean, by the time the water gets from the top of the slope down to the bottom, it's going to be going 80 miles an hour. It's just going to blow right into the wetlands and cause a problem.
So we have an excellent peer review engineer that will review every single piece of that, and we will be discussing. We will have a whole meeting or 2 or 3 devoted to that. So
Great.
A fabulous one. So we will have that all covered.
Very good. The last item that I have that is very important is the arsenic that's on the site. Can you tell me, is the site, what's going on? Is there going to be a cut or a fill on this property? I mean, obviously, you're cutting off the top, but are you going to keep all the material on site, or are you going to, add more material to the site, or are you going to be taking it off-site?
The intent and goal is to try to get as balanced as we can. Obviously, to get a perfectly balanced site is not something that's truly attainable, but we're going to get as close as we possibly can. That was the progression and the development of the plateau and the slopes to ideally keep as much, if not all of it, any soil issues on site. So the intent is to not have anything leave that can't leave.
So with that said, that means that you're going to be taking soils from the top of the plateau where there was arsenic located by your geotechnical engineer or your environmental engineer, and you're going to be taking that and cutting it, and you're going to be placing it on the slopes? Is that true?
I guess, yeah.
We'd have to ask Frank, so we don't have our environmental engineer with us tonight, but we can ask.
So to me, that's a big concern, because basically you're putting this exposed arsenic material on the side slope that when it gets activated with stormwater is going to end up down in the wetlands. So, I ask you guys to take a look at that and make sure that that's not going to happen. Real quick, just your utilities that you're proposing, has anybody done a water pressure and flow test for the main that's in Route 20? And obviously, you're going to have to deal with Mass DOT, because you're going to have to tie into that line. It shows that your 8-inch line going in there.
So the main that's in Route 20, we met with the Water Department today, as well as the Southbridge Department. There's a plan for that, for the water pressure and flow test. So that's probably a whole conversation itself.
Okay.
That we don't need to get into tonight, but they felt confident that water main could, while it needs some repairs, could be brought up relatively quickly and be more than adequate to support the needs that we feel we have at this time.
Oh, good. As for the sewer, do you know, will you require a DEP permit for the discharge of the sewage, because it's, and will it need pre-treatment? Because obviously you're going to have chemicals and fertilizers and things like that in the water that is going to get discharged.
We'll come back with our environment. I would like to have our environmental engineer answer that question in detail.
Okay. As far as the cogen generation facility, is that going to require a Mass DEP air quality permit? It is?
Yes.
Oh. The other thing I noticed that wasn't on your plans was that there was no sort of electrical communication lines brought up onto the site. I didn't see that. Are they going to be underground utilities? Where are they going to be coming to the site from? Are they going to come from Route 20, or are they going to come from the other roads?
So that'll be coordinated with National Grid. Likely National Grid would, there's a 13 kV feeder on the other side of the road right there. So how National Grid proposes to bring that to the site, National Grid is going to do what National Grid wants to do. And then we're likely running these lines underground up to the site.
Okay, so that hasn't been determined yet?
It's not finalized, but that's typical.
As far as the gas is concerned, you mentioned you were going to tap into the transmission main. Do you have permission at this point in time to do that?
Well, there's an interconnection process to do that, and that's underway.
So in other words, you filed, but you haven't been authorized or given a permit to do that?
Correct. There's no authorization to do the tap.
Okay, and And is that why it's not shown on the plans? Because there's not, you just show the easement, you're not showing any kind of connection or any of that? Is that why? 'Cause I mean, I just looked at the plans from a utility standpoint, and I check off the boxes, and I look around, and I see, okay, where's your water coming? Where's your sewer? Where's your electricity? So that's why I'm asking those questions.
That could be added to the line, the line from the proposed tap location to our conditioning pad, metering pads can be added.
And my last question would be, what are you guys going to do to, mitigate the problem of a cross-connection between your cisterns and tying into the city water system? Because right now, it just shows a gate valve where the cisterns meet the 8-inch water line on property. And my concern would be that you'd get cross-contamination. So how is that all going to be handled?
Municipal required backflow preventer, but this is also a line that's not charged right now. This would be the only property using that
Yeah,
line.
but down the road, when it is charged, you know what I mean?
A municipal required backflow preventer
Okay.
prevents the water that could be, for example, sitting in waiting for fire suppression in the
Mhm.
lines
Right.
from backflowing back
Right,
into the.
right. No, I'm very familiar with it. I just want to, it wasn't shown on the plan, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that they're not thorough in that regard.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's it for now. Thank you very much for answering my questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Gerard Russell, 63 Old Worcester Road. Mr. Rosen, the reference earlier to the perimeter lighting, the reference on page 11, lighting, number 4, in order to make the 50-foot pole surrounding the exterior of the property. Just to follow up on Mrs. Russell's question, what is the height of the perimeter lighting, if it's not 50?
I believe they're 25-foot poles.
25?
Yes.
And in the materials you have displayed earlier, the buildings appear to be glass. Is it glass, or is it another material that'll be the skin of the buildings?
Mr. Russell, what you see here is glass will be the top 2/3 of the building, and the lower third is a foam core, solid core. It's not transparent. It's an insulated board that makes up the bottom part of the greenhouse.
So that'll go up 2/3 of the way?
It'll go up approximately 1/3 of the way, and the glass will be up 2/3, the next 2/3.
All right, thank you.
If I can just add to Mr. Russell's point, on page 11, it references not more than 20 feet, and then 2 paragraphs down, it references 50 feet. So I think that's where a lot of the concern came from around town.
Thank you, we'll correct that.
It's a typo, we own it, and we will fix it.
Those chairs are rough.
Ken Howard from Old Worcester Road. I guess I have a couple of questions first for you guys. I'm not trying to make enemies here. It's just I hear all kinds of stuff around town. Just so I know, maybe I'm missing something here. Earlier tonight, you talked about the solar plan for this farm, that it's going to have to be rescinded, revoked. Is that the same plan that got them in, that everybody says it's grandfathered in? Was there a plan for this pot farm turned in before that meeting, or was it a solar plan?
It's almost 2 years ago when the Orchard submitted, I can't remember the name of the company, submitted the whole entire solar plan process, and they were approved by this board to build a solar facility.
Right.
And that's just kind of been open, and I believe it expires in the beginning of October.
So it's a subdivision plan for that property that's currently open for a solar farm.
So is that same plan the one that's
No.
grandfathering?
No.
No, there was, another plan submitted before town meeting, which was called a preliminary subdivision plan.
Okay.
And under state law, that gains the property protection from zoning changes, provided they follow up with a definitive plan. So we are awaiting that definitive plan. If they do that in time, then they will earn their grandfather rights.
Okay, now I know. The water that's, I don't know if it's for you or you guys, is the water and sewer, we heard it was coming down on Worcester Road, or is it actually going to be out tight into 20?
That's a good question, sir. We discussed both scenarios with the town today,
Yep.
and there's pros and cons from the town's perspective and from our perspective to both.
Okay.
But it's undecided. Initially, based on this site plan, we actually proposed to come from both directions, but it's likely we would choose one or the other.
I was just wondering if there's going to be any problem down the road with any future development on Old Worcester Road, say a few more houses. Is there going to be enough water, or are we only buying so much from Southbridge? I mean, 30,000 gallons a day is enough for how many homes? I was reading the average home is 400 to 500 gallons, so you're talking roughly 70 to 75 homes. So
I could provide an answer to that, but I think
I don't know if you
Mr.
knew what they
Warrior
would do as far as how much water we buy.
the town might be more appropriate to provide answers to that.
Okay. Okay. I guess another thing is the curtains you were talking about at night, that you seem to talk about how they're going to cover the roof. Are they also going to cover that upper 2/3 of the walls?
Yes, sir. These actually are curtains that are inside the facility, so
Okay.
it's not outside. So these are
Okay.
inside. They get pulled. They're shade covers. They get pulled right across the top of the inside of the greenhouse,
So they're top and sides?
covering all the glass. And the idea behind those is not to allow, to create intentional dark periods during the middle of the day also,
Okay.
to prevent light coming in.
I live down farther towards the town end of that road, but a few people I know, are abutting the orchard, and they were telling me the other day that now they're hearing rumors that there's going to be the brook that's right at the corner of those 4 ranch houses before the start of the property there. There's a brook that goes under Old Worcester Road there, and eventually it goes down to South Charlton Reservoir, I believe. They heard there's going to be a driveway also there for the fire department. No, I just figured I'd run it by you. That's, like I said, the rumors are flying, so.
Can I see the plan? I met with the deputy
Yeah.
chief today, and there's no such
Yeah,
discussion.
I didn't see
of that
anything. I looked
going
on the plans
here.
online. Actually, when I'm thinking about it, I also just wanted to mention, when I looked at those plans online today, one of the plans, it looks like a red marker or something on the Town of Charlton website, and it looks to me like the fence is right down near the road, not at the top of the plateau. And the scale drawing on there, like a 1/2 inch, I think is 100 feet. Yeah, this one here, isn't this running all along Old Worcester Road?
That's not,
Okay, sure, yeah.
if we can get to that, yep, that's it. Yeah, the red line is what one of the previous gentlemen was referring to as the limit of work / erosion control line. That's a temporary, as he called it, and he's correct, the compost sock, and that helps with erosion control and defines our limit of work. The fence, no, the security fence, can you go back to one of the blown up? Back one, go forward, I think. Yeah, the security fence you can see is a small line right here. And I apologize, it's not easy to see, but it's at the top of that darker green shade. I can point to you, but it's unfortunately everyone else can't see, but that's not a good plan to look at. This one's, it's right here. You can see the circles on the plan at this scale. That's the fence, that's the 6-foot security fence. Up on top of the plateau, not down on the road. Does that help? Yep.
Sorry. How close is this corner right here of that building to Old Worcester Road? I'm just looking at your scale. It looked like it was closer than what I'm hearing.
To give you an idea, if you go back to...
Do you mind going into the mic?
Yep, sorry, yep. These particular drawings that you're looking at right in front of you are not to scale. So, yeah, so if we go to...
It says right here, graphic scale, so.
Yes, but they're supposed to be printed at a 24 by 36 size. This is just reduced for my notes. But this call-out, give you an idea, that's 250 feet. So take away 50 feet for the right-of-way, 200 feet to the road. The building is a little further back from there. Ballpark.
Just check my notes here. I guess some of my other notes were already answered by other people. I would just like to say, to you guys, one of our selectmen said at a previous meeting, maybe not exact quote, but it was more or less, I wrote it down. I have a duty to do no harm, which I think is good, and I think you guys have the same duty. You gotta look out for the town, but you're also, if this thing goes through in this size, and I think personally it ought to be scaled back. I don't have a problem with the other two. This thing I just think is way too big. I've talked to the Cannabis Commission about why it's over 100,000 square feet. But as far as doing no harm, it's gonna harm me, it's gonna harm 100 people on my street at least. I'm getting close to retirement. It's gonna affect the value of my home, my quality of life. I was actually in the hospital today because I was having some heart issues, so I probably shouldn't even be here. But I'm not gonna miss this. And I just think you guys ought to think about that as far as, where are we going with Charlton? Do you want your kids or your grandkids to say, to be here? And do you want Charlton to be known as marijuana farms, solar farms, and LNG gas plants? Or do we want to try to be respectful to everybody that's here and that's gonna stay here and try to keep this town still a good place to live? I'm just thinking 10 years down the road, a lot of people came here. I came here because of the school systems. Are people still gonna come here for the school systems once this thing is gonna be the biggest thing in North America in our town? And I just think it's something for you guys to think about. I mean, you're public servants, you're here to help us, and I'm asking you to do that.
I can tell you that, we all think about it every single day.
Oh, I'm sure. All right, well, thanks. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.
So how many greenhouses are proposed here? How many of the 100,000 square foot? What's the total grow size?
6.
Six, okay. 600,000, so 6 separate 100,000
Yes, sir.
square foot licenses. I know originally it was 10, it was 30, numbers were all over the place.
6.
600,000 was the total size?
600,000 is the total size of the canopy, which are the greenhouses in which the plant is grown.
Not including the manufacturing or the laboratory. Sorry.
That doesn't include the lab facilities and everything else, but the grow facilities are 600,000. Steve Coronis, 17 Old Worcester Road. I have a question for the board, the planning board. If the solar plan from 2 years ago was never rescinded, does their special preliminary plan even valid with having another plan on the property that was never rescinded?
They can file a preliminary plan at any time they want to, and
Over an existing plan without rescinding it?
the plan is a division of land, so it's not a development plan. The solar plan is a site plan. So they just divided, they proposed a division of 2 lots in the preliminary plan, which the planning board rejected, by the way, but that doesn't prevent them from coming back with a definitive plan, which would also show a lot division.
Okay. So that legally, that doesn't have to be rescinded first. Theoretically, you would think it should be, but, right?
Right.
We had that question, that's why we have an attorney here to answer that question. It was, again, we set precedent for the 508, we needed them to rescind. I apologize. We had the same question, and we asked the attorney, and and again, we set precedent at 508 where we had to rescind before we looked at another plan. And I guess that was something that was negotiated with the attorneys in their contract, and it isn't legally necessary. If there's more attorneys and this is a gray law, because I know sometimes there are, then we're welcome to hear more information, but our current consultant says that it's okay. So we have to listen to our current consultant.
So if I had a plot of land in Charlton to sell, I could just come to you guys monthly with a different site plan and just keep piling them on top of you, or at some point do you say,
I guess if you paid the fees. And
it was just a question, I'm not, just a question.
I think,
Well, go ahead.
well, getting to that, if you kept on doing the multiple, you'd have to, before we approve that next one, you have to reject the previous one. So it goes hand in hand. So if you approve one, you gotta reject the other, in theory, right?
Right.
So they only have one approved site plan currently on that parcel.
But there was another one on the property, though, right? The solar.
So there is no
That's the one I'm
approved
talking
site
about.
plan right now, except for that one that was done 2 years ago for the solar.
Exactly.
And that goes to my second question.
That
So
will need to be rescinded before another one gets approved,
Right.
or it will need to be expired before another one gets approved.
And at what point, because if it's my understanding, at some particular point soon, the 61A will be triggered, correct?
now,
That's at the time of,
this board, it's before the building permit, so it's now a condition upon our approval. So before a building permit is pulled, it needs to be completed, that process. I know, if you're, I can read your mind, that there's question on whether this is still considered an agricultural crop or not, and everybody has their opinion on this, and we're waiting for the I guess, the final ruling. Do they not have to take it out of 61A because marijuana may be considered an agricultural crop? In some places it is, in some places it isn't, and I guess legally it will need to be ruled upon to decide if the 61A process has to be completed or not.
Katie, do you know anything about that question?
I know that this is an issue that the Cannabis Control Commission has been discussing at recent hearings. The 61A issue is sort of a different issue from the state agricultural zoning exemption, because the 61A is a tax issue. It's not a land use issue under the zoning provisions. So we're kind of looking at two different agricultural questions that don't necessarily inform each other, but the Cannabis Control Commission, I know, is considering the 61A question.
okay. But at some point that will be triggered at the final, for the town's sake.
And hopefully that decision they will be done with that by then.
And for these gentlemen, did you guys, you've recently changed the name of your organization, correct?
No.
Didn't I read somewhere that it's now VGG Industrial Manufacturing?
No, we didn't change the name of our organization.
It's still Valley Green Grow.
We are Valley Green Grow.
Healthwise changed the name, and maybe you're confusing with that. That's the
No,
company.
sir.
I
No,
thought we were looking at some state filing
Oh,
papers.
okay.
We formed additional entities under different names. We have not changed this entity or this entity's name.
But one of them is VGG Industrial Manufacturing,
There is a company called VGG Manufacturing, yes.
and that's not going to be applicable to this site?
As yet determined, as yet undetermined.
And the only, it's a curious question, because we spent 3 months talking about agriculture, and I thought it was interesting to find out that the name manufacturing even made it to, the word manufacturing even made it to your name.
There's a license called a manufacturing license.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it's not part of the agricultural process.
Okay. And my final question is more about the power plant. And how far have you gotten in, this may be a Vanderwild question, but as far as you keep talking about how unique the property is situated for you guys and how there's a natural gas pipeline, that's a high pressure 30-inch diameter, 36 diameter natural gas interstate pipeline. That's not like putting a tap on your water line for an ice maker. It's high pressure. So that's not typically a location that they want to let you tap off of very readily. How far have you guys gotten along with that? Because my question would be, in your briefs, you said there'd be 2 to 3 tanker trucks coming up the road every single day to load your, of LNG, 10,000 gallon tanker trucks up and down the road. That's
Not every single day. That's a supplementary in case of there's an outage of the Tennessee line, the spur that's underneath here. We don't anticipate that happening, but if that ever happened. But yes, this is a 1,000 PSI line, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes several months.
several months.
Work with.
But it looks like they're, because from what I read here, maybe I had to read it again, but from what I read here, it looks like you're going to start. You want to start with the truckloads, 3 truckloads per day coming up and down Old Worcester Road of LNG. And what if they say no? What if they say no to you at that point? They haven't said yes. Then that's my question, right? That you could tie in there.
No, so the interconnection is in the process. They haven't said yes or no. We're optimistic that it will go through. If there's an instance where, in order to get brought online faster and that's not ready yet, we would consider that's a whole nother discussion, but that's not a part of that's more of a contingency. That's not a daily operation to be bringing trucks with natural gas into the site.
Because if you look at their pipeline, they're typically 30 miles apart where they let those stations, where they go back to LNG, they re-vaporize and reliquidize. But anyway, that's something for you guys to keep an eye on as well, I would think. As far as you keep talking about reciprocating engines, and that I'm in that industry, that kind of baffles me a little bit, because the largest natural gas generator I'm aware of that you can get with a reciprocating engine is a 2 megawatt. With a reciprocating engine? Maybe I'm wrong. It's not more than 4.
What do you think powers ships, boats, locomotives? They get as large as 20 megawatts. Look up the company Wärtsilä.
Okay, I wasn't thinking shipping. I was thinking, I was thinking industrial commercial power generation. You're thinking shipping.
They're also used for industrial, commercial, agricultural power. The 4 companies most commonly developing these are Wärtsilä, Bergen, Rolls-Royce, Jenbacher.
But everybody that I've ever,
we can argue about what you've seen, but when we look at the agricultural, energy and power uses, 10 megawatts is not uncommon.
For a single line?
Can I make a suggestion? Because one of the things we promised we weren't going to do
No,
tonight
I know.
was go back and forth.
Yep.
Question duly noted. I have all the notes. When we have our gas and energy experts here, they'll go through that, they'll present it to the board, and then we'll answer the question.
Yep, I'd love to have that conversation. All right, thank you. If it were, well, we're talking locomotive engines, but.
Again, without going back and forth, we will provide the specifications on the engine as part of our presentation.
I'd like to see it.
Thank you.
Thank you, board.
Margaret Russell, I just am asking for a clarification on something that was said a few minutes ago, that there were 600,000 square feet of growing. Page 1 of your report says 860,000 square feet of closed greenhouse in 6 modules. Somebody explain to me where the other 260,000 square feet are going to be.
Ma'am, there was just problems with the microphone, and it wasn't clear. There's 6 licenses. A license is 100,000 square feet of mature canopy. So when you add up all of the area of these greenhouses together to include not just mature canopy, but the mechanical systems, they call it the grossing area, it's a total of 860,000 square feet of greenhouse and glass building.
space.
So 260,000 square feet of that 860 is not growing space?
Is not mature canopy growing space.
And also in one of the reports, it says that your operation is going to be 24 hours a day. Is that allowed in town?
That's a good question for Kurt, maybe?
Yeah, if
That'd
there's a
be a great
bylaw at all.
question. I don't think there's
about
anything
that, I don't
against
think
it,
there
no.
is.
But the question is something that Kurt would have to answer. I honestly don't know.
I'm not sure.
All ready?
Gerard Russell. Just a quick follow-up on a question that Mr. Coronas had regarding Kidder Morgan and the pipeline. If Kidder Morgan or the state regulators do not allow tapping into that pipeline, which is uncertain, is it the intention of Valley Green Grow to fuel this process with multiple tankers coming up and down Old Worcester Road daily?
I will ask my clients, and we'll get back to you and answer you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sharon Moore, Gale Road, Nine Butter, just a resident. I keep hearing it's impossible to put a road in from Route 20. Impossible, it's just impossible. It's the DOT, it's this, it's that. How impossible is it and how hard are you trying? Because if you could get a road in from Route 20, where your parking lot is, where you have seemingly quite a bit of frontage, and I realize there's elevations involved, oh well. And if you could just use that driveway, which is not Turner Road, it's a driveway, if you could just use that as an emergency road for fire and police, you would solve not all the problems, but you certainly would solve a chunk of problems for the people who live in that neighborhood. Are you trying still to get a road put in, access from Route 20?
Yes, we are, and if you'll recall at the beginning of the meeting tonight, when I talked about staging these sessions and doing discrete tasks and topics at each meeting, we asked to put traffic last because we are trying everything possible. We hear and we recognize and we understand that the primary concern of the neighborhood group is the location of the access.
Would it be beneficial at all if residents of the town, and especially abutters, contacted the DOT to express their concern and their need for that road?
It's not just DOT, it's also the topography, it's the slopes, and it's the wetlands. So that's not just a phone call to DOT. We are continuing to explore it, but I do appreciate the offer, and I do think if and to the extent it comes down to it only being DOT, it might be helpful to have a petition signed by the citizens asking that they do that.
Looking at the wetlands that are indicated on that schematic there, I don't see, I realize there are elevations involved. There are elevations involved in the driveway. It's a very steep driveway. God knows I've driven up that driveway many times. I don't see any wetlands between Route 20 and that very big chunk of frontage.
Ma'am,
So-
if our engineer reviews the plan and feels that it's unsafe to use that as their access road, the board will require a curb cut onto 20. It's all about what the engineer consults us. So the engineer will do a very detailed, we have a very, very good traffic engineer. We've used them many times, very detailed. They'll come in with their recommendation, and if their recommendation is this is too much traffic for this road, it'll cause harm, there'll be a safety issue, the board will require a curb cut. That's something that we can do if it's necessary.
Okay.
Just in fairness to your comment, so when we talk about wetlands, the easiest way to deal with the slope is to come in from the west. And so if you look to the west where we have longer distances and the ability to potentially manage slope better, that's where the wetland interferes with it. So when we talk about a combination of things, you have steep slope in the front, you have severe wetlands to the west. And so it's, we explored the west. We felt as though that was going to be a viable option early on. Unfortunately, once we got out there and explored the wetlands more, so it's kind of balancing all of those things. But again, we do hear the concern. We've been hearing it very loud and clear, and we are continuing to explore those options.
Terrific. One other question. It seems to me we're talking only about growing now. At one time, I may have missed something someplace. At one time, there was talk about over on the other side, there being a retail operation with a cutout to Route 20. Has that gone away?
We are not exploring that as an option at this time.
So that's no longer part of your plan?
It is not part of this submission.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Roger Cloutier. I'm on 17 Coburn Road. I am not an abutter. My question is, if this plan here, is it going to include a retail operation as well, or is it just going to be a growth operation? Because at one time you talked about a separate building for retail and then this for growth.
Again, Ms. Moore just asked that question. This plan, this location, does not include retail.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah.
And I kind of have a question for the board, if I could. No disrespect meant at all, but a 10,000 square foot, 18 megawatt power plant, in no way can I envision that being agriculture. I know it's an accessory to agriculture, but that's a major power plant. I mean, Millennium is 360 megawatts. So, I mean, you can kind of imagine. I used to work for Saint-Gobain Norton Company. We had this big, tall brick smokestack, and we had our own power plant. But that wouldn't fly today. But anyway, to me, it just strikes me as odd that that's to, I would make them bring the electricity in from Mass Electric or something. But that's just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
John Smith, 136 Trestle Hill Road. I am not an abutter. Are you guys?
Here.
Hello? 136 Trestle Hill Road, John Smith. Is the town requiring you guys to place a bond on this project?
I don't know. You would have to ask this board as we go through site plan approval.
I'm sure.
There will clearly be all sorts of calculations by our engineers. They determine what the amount of bonds, and since there's not many examples to go by, we can't tell you up front. I'm sure there will be. Your answer is yes, there will be, but the amounts and where they're coming from, that will be discussed. That's
It's
part of
usually
our
evaluation on the total cost of the project. Sure. So if
Like in solars, we have the decommissioning. Our engineers will consult with us to recommend appropriate bond amounts and the reasons why we would have them and for what particular items we would have them for.
I just have a question or comment for the council. You kind of minimize the amount of chagrin the town has gone through this whole process when you were referencing the nullification or the hesitation or the stopping of the process. This has been a very contentious process through the whole period of time here, and we did have a vote to put this to a ballot. So I wouldn't offhand dismiss the possibility to put a moratorium on it. I know there's been, and I'm not quite clear with it, I'm going to ask you, wasn't there a recent ruling by the Cannabis Commission about host voting for the ability to vote for these marijuana facilities in towns just last week or so? Was there something that came out?
The Cannabis Control Commission is looking at a number of issues with respect to municipal guidance documents. They have recently issued guidance on host community agreements. They've also looked at local equity. There's nothing that they've issued, to my knowledge, that deals specifically with the voting of towns to prohibit or ban. That's really all spelled out in the state law, and communities have been following that process. There's just a brief point of legal clarification. I am aware of the town's vote with respect to a complete prohibition of marijuana establishments. What this revision to the bylaw that I reviewed just recently looked at was not with respect necessarily to a complete ban. It was with respect to some sort of limitation. There's a specific requirement that whatever limitation bylaw you pass, that same language has to be mirrored in the ballot vote. And so, so if there was a desire of the town to put in place the type of limitation that was provided in this draft bylaw, my point, just from a point of legal clarification, is that you would need a ballot question that reflected that exact language.
Okay, thank you.
This will really be the last question. When this project was sold to our Board of Selectmen, we were told it would be a world-class research facility. Can somebody show me on these plans where the research is?
I'm not aware of anyone or who, so I could look into who stated that. But this is not research and development, because research and development is not a permitted use on this property. We are exploring other locations within the community within which research and development can be conducted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think, I believe that it was Deb Noble who actually said that. Maybe, would you like to answer Ms. Russell's question?
No, I think this is for the citizens out here to listen tonight.
Okay, I just want, because we all watch those meetings, so.
Hello, Noreen Smith at 136 Dresser Hill Road, and I'm just wondering, sorry about that, I was complaining earlier too. I'm just wondering, in what way is this a subdivided property? So my understanding was there was a subdivision filed on the property. Could you explain to me exactly what is subdivided here?
We don't have that plan yet, so I can't answer that question. It should be coming in soon.
We received a preliminary, which was a way to grandfather them in for the original zoning.
Exactly my question. So what does it mean to, where is the subdivision that would qualify for grandfathering here?
And it's just the terminology. Bill knows
Well, they
that
did submit
much better than.
a preliminary plan which showed a division of 2 lots, but the planning board rejected that plan, so they need to come back with a plan that the planning board will review as a definitive plan. So until we see that, I can't answer your question in terms of how they will propose to divide that parcel.
Okay, could I ask, with the drawings that we have here that show a substantial amount of the property consumed by the building and the topography and the limitations of the wetland, is this a subdivision? I just don't understand
Well, this is a site plan.
Right.
They're different, so they were grandfathered in with a preliminary, and they have 7 months to submit a definitive to still be grandfathered in. Otherwise, they wouldn't be grandfathered in under the original zoning. They would be grandfathered, they would have to comply with the current zoning that we have on the books right now.
Right.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Somewhat. Thank you.
Are we questioned out? Anybody else?
Sorry, I don't mean to test your patience, but
We are
if
doing this for a reason.
there is a subdivision and they have a set amount of time to come back with a definitive plan, isn't this discussion and this plan premature?
Well-
Explain the legality.
This plan would have to be on a legal lot, so when they submit their definitive plan, that would have to be a complying lot. And then they could have another lot somewhere else that, just, because a subdivision has to, it's a division of land into 2 lots. So this would have to be 1 lot, and then another lot would be somewhere else.
So could we ask Valley Green Grow to come back in a timely fashion with the definitive subdivision plan?
They have 7 months.
So can we delay this process for 7 months?
No.
I think my question, Bill, is what is the timeline look like for them to comply with that?
Mike, do you recall when you submitted your preliminary?
I believe it was in the end of April, so we would have until the end of November to submit the definitive.
Okay.
Not sure I understand, but thank you.
Well, they have 7 months from filing the preliminary plan, so if you count from April, end of April, 7 months forward, or from that point.
So I don't think this particular site plan could be approved under the current subdivision plan they have, because I don't think it fits on those lots. Is that correct? So for this site plan to be approved, there would have to be a new subdivision plan or a new...
Yeah, we'll have to, have to see what they come in with.
So we deal with 3 different legal documents on this board, and the use of the subdivision was kind of exclusive to get that grandfather that particular lot in on zoning, correct me if I'm wrong. And now to do a business, they need to submit a site plan, which is the correct legal document to do something like this. It's, again, the subdivision was really just to grandfather that particular piece of property for the original zoning before we adopted the new zoning bylaw. As you know, the new zoning bylaw has the 1,000-foot buffer between each 100,000 facility, so it would be a much different process if they weren't grandfathered in under the original. With no other questions, I'd like to close the public.
Just continue.
Oh, I'm sorry. Continue the public hearing to.
October 19th? September, what did we say?
Michael Andrade said he would have the peer review of the civil engineering work done by the next meeting.
September 19th.
So if you wanted to, we could discuss the civil engineering peer review comments.
So we added another meeting for the end of
So
September.
Jean won't be here for October 3rd, so we won't continue that one. So if we heard it here, Jean should be back.
For the 19th.
September 19th, we also have Foursquare, right?
Oh, so,
Foursquare.
so there is no way this board is going to sit through Foursquare and this. There's no way.
Did we add another meeting? When did we add another meeting for the?
September 26th.
We
We
had
did,
September 26th.
but that's for the zoning.
Already for the zoning, and
Okay.
that needs to be exclusive. So with that, with Jean not being here, she can't miss 2 meetings or she won't vote. We need the whole vote, the whole board on here. So I am going to continue it to October 17th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Chairperson, could I ask a question? Noting that you'll be getting the peer review in sometime between now and then, and noting that we are not going to try and do everything, obviously, at one meeting, does it make sense that we appoint a person, for instance, the planning director, to determine the topics for that evening to ensure that the appropriate experts are here, so that the towns doesn't need to have 10 experts here, the applicant doesn't need to have 10 experts here, and perhaps even in the posted agenda, that way the citizens will have an understanding of what would get discussed,
We will
That's a good idea.
Obviously, it might be,
We will exactly do that.
okay.
We have a couple of meetings in between to kind of get the details, and we will absolutely share it with you so you know the schedule. The only issue we have if we do traffic and
Right.
traffic needs to, we can give you an order if that makes sense. But if we need 2 nights of meetings to cover a certain area, we have
We have to be flexible to that.
we have an agenda filled with items. This is very rare that we only have you, and this was done on purpose.
Yep.
So we will have to allot and be a very strict with the timelines based on what additional things that we have on the agenda. And we'll try to be, there will be a clear focus. If we're talking about traffic, all the questions will be focused on traffic, and if the question is not about traffic, the question will be
We'll have to
stopped.
wait. And I would encourage the public to send in any questions you can have so that we can forward it to them, so that we can get very specific answers. Because what we found a lot of tonight was they had to consult other experts who weren't here, which we understand why. We want the correct experts answering those questions. So this isn't a criticism, but if you have the questions ahead of time, you can then come prepared. And if you have 10 questions, even though we're discussing traffic that has to do with something else, perhaps we can be a little bit flexible to that and get that question answered for our townspeople, because again, it is very important that everyone have their fears, if you will, their questions settled in a timely manner.
And we all have many, many, many questions. I have almost a full notebook of questions after my review. So if anybody is a little bit concerned that we didn't have questions on this board, it was, in my mind, it was already, as the chair, already pre-decided that I wanted the abutters residents to be able to answer their questions at our first meeting. And in addition, we didn't have our engineering comments, which is always the first
Yes.
thing that we go through.
Mhm.
Everybody obviously has my email in this town because I get so many, but emails to Jane, obviously to any of us, we're all open to answer questions, concerns at all. Please be in communication with our department. We're being as transparent as humanly possible. And that's all I can say. I will see all of you back on October 17th, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
To
you.
remind the lady you put traffic on the list, to the extent that we can come up with alternatives.
Yeah,
I think
we're
that's a great
waiting.
idea.
We have all these thoughts in our mind, but when we hear from our engineers, they'll be much more clear.
Thank you. Thank you.
As someone who lives on Old Worcester Road, I am very interested in traffic.
They do this one.
So we have
Information.
Much else.
The secretary.
planning board discussion.
You want to discuss the letters that Bill sent out this week, or any issues with those, any concerns?
We did get a letter in from Mr. Gunter today.
Mr. Gunter?
Yes. He had, I had not sent him my letter, so he just sent this in on his own.
Okay.
It covered some of the topics
Okay.
that were in that letter.
Is there anything still left open on that? Was the work done with the tree warden? Was those issues?
Are we talking about the Gunter estate? I will recuse myself.
Oh, well, let's leave it to the chair to see what, I was just curious.
If we all remember back, we didn't allow them to, they wanted to rescind it.
Yes.
And because of the deals with the land trust and other items, we said no. And there is a letter back. Did everybody get that?
I didn't get
letter?
I didn't get the letter.
Emails.
The letter back, this one.
Did they get a copy of that
Yes,
letter
yes, yes.
from Mr.
Okay.
Gunter today?
Okay.
Yeah.
This one I haven't seen. Okay,
Okay.
I have it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have it, I have not read it.
So in his letter, he's committing to restoring the damage from the trees. He's saying that the power company is going to take care of the utility poles. He does not address the drainage issues that I mentioned in the letter. He has not reserved any open space on the site. It's all in large lots, 10 acres or more, but it's all privately
So
owned.
it's still an open issue.
And he's not been able to come to an agreement with the Greater Worcester Land Trust on the location of the Mid-State Trail. So I guess the question is whether you still want me to go forward with that letter, and, strongly suggest that he try to work that out, continue to work with the Land Trust on that question.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, all the matters should be settled before we do anything else. So let's leave it in their court and let them both be happy, let them figure things out and then come back to us and go from there.
So since you already have answers to some of these, you don't have answers to everything, so I would
Right.
still recommend sending that letter
Okay.
out and just as it was written.
Okay. Would you like...
So that he knows where the board stands on that.
Would you like to have a discussion with him at the next meeting, or just do it by mail and handle it that way?
I think mail is going to be, is fine.
He's
Do
in
we need-
California, so we'd have to send somebody to...
Yeah, at this point, that's fine.
Okay.
If things don't get resolved in a timely fashion,
Okay.
maybe it would be good to have that discussion in person.
He, as you may or may not know, he did submit 2 reduced frontage special permits,
Yes.
which I have not advertised yet, because I didn't think we were ready to hear those.
Nope.
And I will, if you want, I will hold off on that process as long as I can.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but it's my opinion that we should
Okay.
hold off until things are
Well, I do
settled.
think we should work out the rescission and/or amendment process first. And council talked to Jim Cosgrove, and he said that we don't have to rescind. We can vote to amend,
Okay.
and as an amendment, we can condition that amendment approval. So I think and as you recall in that letter, I also raised the question of a major residential development, which gives the planning board additional tools to negotiate from, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I would like to see some of those things get resolved. It may not be to everybody's satisfaction, especially the land trust and whatnot, but something,
Okay.
an effort needs to be made.
They can work together to compromise. They're both businessmen,
Yep.
and they can both figure it out and
Yep.
come back to us. We're not babysitters. They
Yep,
just,
yep. So I agree.
Do we have minutes to review or not yet? Okay, it's just always on here.
In this subdivision.
Do you want to?
Sure. We have a request to extend the Jennings Road subdivision that expires the 15th of September, 2018. We have a request here somewhere to extend that a year. I think you got that in your packet.
What's going on with that? What's going on up there?
The Jennings Road?
Nothing?
Oh, yeah, house is going on.
Yeah.
They're almost out. A lot of spots.
The letters, let me read the letter. It's dated.
Yeah, might as well have it on the record.
Dated September 2nd, 2018. It's from GAIR LLC, 221 Brookfield Road, Charlton, to the planning board. To whom it may concern, we would like to take this opportunity to ask that you place us on your next agenda so that you may renew our Jennings Road subdivision. Thank you, Russell Jennings.
I'd like to make a motion, we approve the extension of that to September 15, 2019.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we have anything else that we want to?
You may recall for the Lunar Meadows site, they're proposing a solar field up on North Sturbridge Road, and they submitted a preliminary subdivision plan, which the board approved. They have filed the definitive plan, essentially based on that preliminary plan. So I'd ask the board to accept that plan so that we can begin the review of that. It's similar to the Colburn Road site where they're not building a subdivision road, they're asking for a lot of waivers. So Graves will be reviewing that plan and decide whether those waivers have merit or not, and give you their opinion.
Do we vote to accept that?
Yes, I think so. I can show it to you if you like, but
I'd like to make a motion we accept the definitive subdivision plan for Luna Meadows.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I had another question. You know, Don was appointed an associate member, and then when he was appointed a full member of the board, we lost that associate position. I was wondering if you wanted to try to recruit somebody to fill that spot. It requires a joint vote of the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, but it's helpful to have
You can post
associate
that.
member in certain situations.
I know that we have a hard time getting things posted, but would you actually ask for it to get posted for us, Jane? While we're all here, I'm sure I did forward the emails now requesting more meetings to, again, discuss our director's salary, which was voted on at town meeting. And you did all see my response, which was pretty much, we've had a bunch of meetings and we're pretty much done. And I think the big issue is they have our planning director on the wrong union grade or whatever it is. And it's kind of still in lull. I don't know if you guys really think I should meet again, but it seems every time we meet, first of all, I would never meet alone. I would want at least another board member, and in reality, I invite them to come to our meetings, so we're all here. I think we need to be very careful about how we go about this. I know the Fair Pay Equity Act is used as one of the excuses why we can't have a director that's big issues. However, the qualifications, the experience, the amount of education, and the biggest thing is supply and demand. There's no planners out there, so they're getting paid higher salaries these days. Our planner answers to nobody besides us locals, and we need somebody who can really manage the whole process, review plans like this. So we're not looking at a baby college graduate or someone who acted as kind of a junior planner. We need somebody who's seasoned. I'm concerned that the reason why we don't have many applicants is really we're not advertising where we should. We discussed about possibly getting the advertisement on Indeed, and we were told that the town doesn't have a credit card, so we can't get an account on Indeed. There's all these barriers, and I guess I think that as a board we have the full ability to advertise and interview and choose our planner, and as well negotiate salary. And we're all pretty reasonable here. We're not going to pay somebody 90 if they deserve 70. And then pretty much inform them this is who we've selected. However, if we go ahead and make a job offer and we sign it, it locks the town into a little bit of liability, because now we have a job offer on the table, and our contract would be legal with our signature on it. And if they don't set up a salary account and start paying our new director, we're opening our town to lawsuit. I don't want to do that, but we need a planner. And so with my opening comments, what does everybody else feel? Because I'm kind of...
Well, we need to find some candidates first before we...
But it needs to be properly advertised, and that's the problem that we're having, and it's too bad that we're having that issue. I know that a neighboring town, not neighboring, but what town of Auburn's looking for a planner as well, and I know they're advertising in different spots that we're not. I mean, it's, I don't know if it's a pitfall of the Human Resource Department or not, I don't know.
And
Well, I think
believe-
that letters should be sent from our board to the board that controls the HR department to direct them to make sure they are exercising all their options for the best interest of the town.
Right.
to try and advertise for this position. I mean, what's it been, 8 months? That we've had the interim, not that the intern's been doing great. We're glad to have Bill on, but it's just that we need to have someone that's full-time.
Right. Could we advertise with CMRPC? I mean,
We have, I mean, at the very, very beginning, and that's when we got our first round of
Okay.
candidates,
And at that point, that was the only place I think that we were advertising.
and I think Indeed is, if you look on Indeed, there's multiple planner jobs. You know, I think that's the way to go.
they are very expensive. I'm going to
I know
caution
it's
you.
like 800 or something, or 500, or.
I don't know how their pricing structure works. I just had a member come in who's being billed by them, and their prices are all over. They're very random. It's 50 here, 80 here, 20 here, 200 over here. So I'm not sure how they charge out, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea, because I think we need much better advertising, but there might be, I don't know how expensive LinkedIn is, there might be alternative resources that are a little bit cheaper. I think Indeed is awesome. I think we could go as simple as a Craigslist posting to get it started, just something over what we're doing.
Yeah, I would caution where we do it, but your
We don't
point's
wanna
taken.
like hillbillies
I think
here, you know, or-
Indeed is a pay-per-hit site.
Okay, is that how it bills
So
out?
it depends on how much traffic they get
Okay.
to your page and
Okay.
how much you pay. The prices are relatively low, but you could get a lot of hits off of that, so. You
heard
can
that.
set a limit and say,
Okay.
this is what we want to spend. When it reaches that, they'll pull it.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
for 3 to 500, you can get a reasonable amount of hits,
Okay.
I'm told.
Mhm.
So Jen, can you look into that a little bit more for us to see what we can do? If I have to use my credit card and get reimbursed, I can use my credit card and get reimbursed. But I think it's something we need to.
We need to do
it,
something,
right?
yes.
We can take a collection if we have to.
I mean,
Pass a hat at the
We'll
next
pass the hat around at the
public
next-
so
hearing.
maybe at some meetings, we can sell some snacks or something. And just earn Girl Scout cookies, right?
That's
I
right.
can donate my 70 cents a box.
Maybe special brownies, too.
Special comfortable chairs out there? Upgrade to a,
But, I mean, so I'm getting asked questions in town. I'm walking through Old Home Day. Is the town administrator specifically holding up Sandy because she wants VGG to go through? I mean, these are the kind of questions I'm being asked, and how, we need to get this, and I went, I don't know. I went, I exactly said, I don't know, is she?
But
Why don't you ask her? That was my answer, because I'm just so nice. But I'm kind of done with all of this, and we can send a letter to them, but we're taking the route, we're advertising, we'll own the advertising, we'll figure out where we need to advertise, we'll list our salary, we know what our max salary is, we all know how to negotiate. How many people do you hire a year? We can handle it, and then we'll give them the final determination, only because we gave them 8 months and we have nothing. And there's just a point where you need to kind of take control and make it work. So
I
there's-
just, one point, I think there are 2 ways to go. The planning director is currently in N7, and so you can increase the salary range for that position, or you could make it an N8, in which case you need to go to town meeting to make that change. So if you wanted to go that route, you need to get an article in for this
We have
town
to go
meeting.
to
in
town
order-
meeting to change the grade, because they changed the grade from N8 to N7. Did they go to a town meeting to do that?
I think the difference was the N8 included planning director / EDC director. The planning director itself is just an N7. So if you want to go to an N8, you need
Great.
town
There's a-
meeting vote.
I'll go to the microphone on October 15th.
But I think you need to submit an article.
Yeah, you do.
No,
So
question,
can you work on that so we can get an article submitted? I don't know when the deadline
If
is.
that's your preference, we can do that.
now where's this is this a state classification, N7 and 8, or is that a town?
I
The
think it's
specific union.
town, yeah.
Because wait, the planner's in a union position, right?
it's not
So
even-
why are we bringing the
It's off the
union into
chart.
it?
The fact that directors have a union, the
All right.
fact that directors have a
So then,
union is
on
absolutely
N7 and 8,
That's an
insane.
internal
Unions.
town job grade.
Unions are for employees, not management, so it's just absolutely obscure that our our managers are in unions. It's just, I've worked for the state union.
So who's in a union? What managers are in unions in the
Managers
town?
aren't in unions.
No, not in the town
But our
either.
director is a manager. Our director is right? He's a
But the-
director, a director is a high level.
But he is not a union.
He is union. He's
No.
considered union.
No, he's not union.
No.
Then why is he classified then by
No,
the
that's
union?
just a job grade. That's just a
I believe that's
municipal
correct.
job grade.
So then it's just,
Job
really that classification kind of means nothing. It's only some legality to stop us from hiring a planner for the salary we want that the town already voted that we should have. Again, I hate to be, so aggressive on this, but I want a planner. We all want a planner, we need a planner. We're doing this. So are we gonna say in the middle of this, we're gonna hire a planner and so now we're gonna be paying a consultant and a planner? Are we gonna have enough salary to pay a consultant and Bill and the planner if we're in the middle of this in 4 months from now? I have a lot of concern about salary. There's a lot of games being played with accounts and salaries and what we can spend. I'm nervous. I signed the pay for over 20 hours, and I'm like, man, are we taking away from our planner salary? Because it's coming from our planner salary account. These things concern me. We gotta pay attention because it's very, very easy to kind of get tricked, like how we did with the original agreement of to lower the salary with little meetings, with little side conversations. That's why everything needs to be in our meetings. If they want to have a meeting, they can come to our planning board meeting. Welcome, we're here every other Wednesday, so they can get on the agenda and we can discuss again. However, I am adamant that we went to town, the town gave us our salary, and we have that to spend, and they can figure out the grade to fix it. If it helped for us to submit an article to get this done, then we will. Bill, can you please write that up?
Sure.
So we can change it if that makes it official. But in the meantime, let's, by the next meeting, let's figure out Indeed and how much it's actually gonna cost. We'll get it advertised there unless it's absolutely astronomical. And Dawn, you said you checked the sites, the planning sites. Can you?
I can do another search to see what I can know what that is.
Please, could you kind of take hold of that and send them the actual advertisement?
Sure.
Because they'll put it on their site, they'll post it, just so I
Sure,
know
so
that
I'll
I
get the
can
information
trust
just to make sure
somebody
that-
to
sure.
actually make
I'll-
sure it
I
gets done.
will-
Can we do that before we change the classification?
I guess, I mean, I'm not waiting for that to
Yeah,
happen.
because that's
Has nothing to
separate
do
of
with-
that.
It has
Okay.
nothing to do with anything, I don't think.
What are the other classifications for some of the other managers or some of the other department heads? Do we know that? Yeah, that would be helpful. What's,
And then
water,
think-
sewer,
yeah.
conservation, at what point are they? Yeah.
Then I think the language for the article, I think, would, to align the classification with the salary that was approved at the Maytown meeting. That's pretty much the
Yeah,
goal
because
of it.
that was the whole that was the
That's
process.
what- yeah, that's what it
The
was.
townspeople spoke, and
Yeah.
therefore, let's just make that.
And that's like the purpose of it. Just, I think,
Okay.
to make the language
Yeah.
kind of black and white, and the purpose, the
This
reason
is
for it.
why we're doing it.
Yeah.
because the salary was so set
Perfect.
at this
To just
point,
make-
unfortunately.
To align to what the town people
Exactly.
wanted. Perfect.
Yeah.
On a quick Google search, it is posted in 2 different locations. It is apa.mass.org jobs, and then it's also on this other site that I can look up.
So just 2 websites?
There's 2 sites it's
Right,
advertised on.
I submitted it to the Mass APA site and to
Okay.
the
Thank you.
Okay,
Connecticut as well.
All
okay.
right, so just 2.
In Connecticut, good.
Okay.
But I think
It was
we're
on
on
the
a
CMA site.
Beacon,
It's pretty cool.
the MMA job board.
Yep.
As
And,
well.
I know there's a state website that has all state jobs. Is there some?
Like a municipality almost,
municipality
yes.
sort of like hiring site that?
Is that the MMA?
The
It's the
MMA
MMA.
probably,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
And you said you'd do that tomorrow? Is that what? Sorry.
Jessica was going to
Jessica was-
revise
okay.
the job description based on our conversation.
Yep.
And then when I get that, I'll go ahead and
Okay.
and repost it where I
And,
can.
and can you be sure that the salary range is posted in that,
That was
we
one of
have
the
an
things
issue
that
with that.
we asked for, right?
for whatever reason?
All right, so, Is there anything else?
There is one other thing. You had in your packet a notice of a conflict of interest seminar.
September
You're
19th?
being strongly encouraged to attend. It's Tuesday, September 18th. There are two sessions, 3 to 4:30,
It's
and
not mandatory?
I don't think so, not for a planning board.
I have, because of my licenses and my job, I'm required to get so many CPEs a year, and many of them are ethics and
Right.
all that.
I've taken the ethics
required
test,
to
sure,
take the
right.
online courses, so I think I'm covered, and I'd rather not have to use another.
I'll put it on my calendar, I plan on attending. Just sounds like fun. It'll be the night session, it'll be the later one. Yeah, probably be the 6 o'clock, thank you.
And just for information, I've been appointed to that solar bylaw committee.
Okay.
We are meeting that night
Is
at
that-
7:30.
So, and I hate to be picky about this, are those hours that you spend doing that coming off of our planning salary? Because when I looked at it, if you work over 20 hours a week, we won't have enough money to fund our planner, and I am very concerned about that. I just want to make sure, so if that's something, did Robin appoint you?
The selectmen did.
Okay, so if they appointed you, then please can we actually send an email over to make sure that that's coming out of their own salary, whatever account that they're gonna pull it from, and not our planner salary account? And make sure we get a response, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we miss anything, Jane?
No, just that was the last thing.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.